I have a sweet at the end of the world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 926, Space Elevator completed. As long as the weather is good enough, even if you are standing on the island of New Guinea hundreds of kilometers away, you can still see the giant tower that reaches into the sky. No one knows what it is, as if it appeared there overnight, and it grows towards the center of the earth day and night, falling below the skyline. From a distance, it looks like a strand of hair, and only with a high-power telescope can you see the staggered textures on the tower. If you are on Anger Island, the southernmost island of New Guinea, you can see the macroscopic picture of this tower even with your naked eyes. It is for this reason that many aerospace and alien enthusiasts have traveled thousands of miles to New Guinea just to see this incredible spectacle. Yes, only the word spectacle can describe this magnificent project that connects heaven and earth. Dad, what is that? Standing on the beach of Anger Island, the little boy pointed to the white line connecting heaven and earth in the distance and asked crisply, "That's the elevator." Looking at the space elevator in the distance, the man in beach pants had a fascinated expression on his face. Elevator? Where does such a high elevator go? The little boy looked at his father and asked with a puzzled look on his face. Go to space. The man rubbed the boy's head. When Dad was a kid, you had to use a very high rocket to go to space and ignite it from behind to fly up. Now, an elevator is enough. Space? Will I have a chance to go? The little boy asked his father with hope in his eyes. Of course. Not just space. Maybe you will have a chance to go to a more distant place. The man smiled and looked at the cloud pierced by the space elevator. Son, you've caught up with a good era. The sea area near the space elevator was designated as a military restricted area by Starring Trade. A frigate modified with a J-Type 50 electromagnetic gun cruised in the nearby waters, driving away ships entering the area with the help of a Coast Guard ship. An offshore platform equipped with a laser air defense system was deployed in the waters about 2 kilometers away from the space elevator to defend against missiles or aircraft that might threaten the space elevator. Under the narrow space elevator, there is a rectangular block several kilometers long and wide, floating on the sea. As the sea base station of the space elevator, it can dock cargo ships with a displacement of 10,000 tons, and the runway next to it also allows civil airliners to dock. The space elevator, that has been completed, has 6 passenger channels on the inside and 6 freight channels on the outside. A vertical carriage is placed in the passenger channel. The single carriage can carry 60 to 80 passengers and adopts the principle of electromagnetic drive. The entire car is like a projectile of an electromagnetic gun, accelerating on the energized rail. As for the freight channel, the principle is similar to the passenger channel, but because it is used to transport goods, the acceleration of the car will be above 10 g, which is unbearable for humans, and the vertical running speed will also be close to the first universe acceleration. Each freight car can push 50 tons of goods to the synchronous orbit, which is equivalent to 2 Long March 5th carrier rockets. As for the transportation cost per ton of goods, it is even more than SpaceX's Falcon series rockets. For this giant tower connecting outer space and the Earth, countries seem to have known something, but they have kept silent. I believe that, even if they say nothing, the future group will soon disclose this secret. They were waiting for the future group to speak first, and then they would make their own demands, based on the bargaining chips in their hands. Compared with the silence of various governments, the internet was in an uproar. Space elevator. This concept that originally only existed in fantasy literature, film, and television works was actually brought to reality by the future group! Exclamation mark. What completely ignited public opinion was a video uploaded to YouTube by a newly registered user. In the video, employees of Starring Trade operated engineering vehicles, loaded unknown goods into the cargo box of the space elevator, and then sent them into space. The video was shot very clearly and edited. This anonymous user is likely to be an insider of Starring Trade. It can even be said that this video was released at the instruction of Starring Trade. Regardless of the purpose of the release of this video, it has caused enough sensation on the internet not to mention other online platforms. Just below the comment area of this video, netizens expressed their shock in various languages. Oh my god, I can actually witness mankind's entry into the interstellar age in my lifetime. You're going too far. It's just a broken elevator. They haven't even built the Armstrong cyclotron acceleration superwarp engine, and they dare to claim to be entering the interstellar age. What kind of broken stuff are you talking about? Don't say anything. Take some medicine first. I heard that Japan's Abayashi Construction Company plans to start building a space elevator in 2050? Please tell me the psychological shadow area of the president of this company. Not only netizens spontaneously discussed, but major newspapers, television, and online media also followed up on this century-long project of Future Group. The breakthrough in graphene technology has laid the groundwork for the completion of the space elevator today. The height of 36,000 kilometers will surpass any tall building in the world, and will also surpass any building in the next 50 years. It is worth reflecting on that when we are trying to build buildings higher and make them more valuable, so valuable that most people can't afford them. A small country far away in the Pacific has reached out to a place where we can only look up. BBC News. The contradiction of rockets is that most of the rocket fuel is consumed in pushing the fuel itself. The space elevator, on the other hand, can send what we need to push to the synchronous orbit only by relying on electricity. Peter, the president of the International Space Elevator Association, believes that the space elevator is an amazing technology that can open the door to the solar system. A few years ago, we all thought he was crazy, but now I'm afraid no one will doubt it. Columbia Broadcasting. Behind this great project is a very creative entrepreneur. His contribution to modern civilization is far greater than that of Jobs and Gates combined, because the breadth of his fields is jaw-dropping. And such a great entrepreneur was born in the Jiangnan area of my country, a small county called Hucheng. What kind of living environment gave birth to such a genius? Let us walk into this small county, into the school where he once lived, and explore. Jiang Chen suddenly laughed out loud when he was halfway through flipping through the People's Daily in his hand. Aisha walked to his side with coffee, gently placed it on the table, tilted her head, and looked at Jiang Chen, who was grinning. Did anything good happen to you? I guess so. Jiang Chen shook his head and threw the newspaper aside. As an official media, the People's Daily also reflects the position of the Chinese government to a certain extent. These days, the People's Daily has been doing its best to package him as a for-good youth who goes from China to the world and wins glory for the country. Although he was happy to see someone bragging about him in his hometown, he had to think about the deep meaning behind it. I hope they will stand on our side at the United Nations Summit on the Rational Development of Outer Space in a week. Jiang Chen picked up the coffee thoughtfully and took a sip. There is no doubt that the space elevator will definitely be the focus of discussion at this United Nations Summit on outer space. And what kind of vote the 5 gangsters will make on this issue is also a problem that the Future Human Group has to pay attention to. If nothing unexpected happens, China and Russia should send people to contact him privately. The United States should also send people, and the United Kingdom, which has left Europe, should also send people. As for the European Union, they may be more reserved. After all, the relationship between the Future Group and the European Union is a bit delicate. No matter what the United Nations will vote on at the summit, the starring trade plan will not change. On the second day after the summit, the space elevator will officially open the first train from the offshore platform to the synchronous orbit space station, starring City. This time, it is not cargo that is delivered, but people. Chapter 927, The End of an Era. Moscow, Kremlin. A special meeting is being held here around the space elevator that was completed in the territorial waters of the new country in the western Pacific Ocean. Just yesterday, Starring Trade sold us the promised RM320 rocket engine. The reverse engineering has been launched. Within a year at the latest, the new rocket engine will replace the old aerospace engine. We will surpass the United States in the aerospace field in 1 year. It took decades for us to leave us behind. However, unfortunately, when Starring Trade handed us this sword, it also drew down the curtain of the entire stage. Whether it is economic, political, cultural, or military, everything tomorrow will be different from today. because there is the unknown, and the unknown means infinity. At this point, Oleg Ostapenko, director of the Russian Space Agency, lowered his eyebrows and stated the facts in an artistic way, looking at the members of the Russian Federation Council present, and the president, Putin, who was sitting in the first seat. After a pause, Oleg continued, "Guys, the old times are over." After taking a deep breath, the Minister of Defense looked at Putin, who was silent, and whispered, "If the space elevator can send tons of materials to outer space, then our proud aerospace defense forces will become a joke." Putin tilted his head slightly. "Fortunately, our relationship with them is good." "That's right, but we can't pin all our hopes on good diplomatic relations." The Minister of Defense lowered his voice and continued to whisper beside Putin, "The United Nations will discuss the safety and rational use of the space elevator. I agree that maintaining good bilateral relations with New Zealand is more in our interests, isn't it? Appropriately weakening them." Putin raised his hand and interrupted the Minister of Defense's speech. "If the United Nations in New York is destined to become history, then what's the point of us making things difficult for them at the United Nations?" Far away in the Capitol in Washington, a special hearing was also being held. At the meeting, facing the gloomy faces of the congressmen, experts, and scholars from all walks of life, Charles Bolden, the director of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, read the manuscript in his hand. "Although Congress has been trying to cut our budget, we still use the limited budget to advance the space program step by step. The achievements made over the past decades are huge, so great that they are astonishing. We have not only achieved the privatization of the space industry, but also made this seemingly money-losing space project profitable in the end. Yes, we were ahead." Mr. Bolden paused here and glanced meaningfully at the congressman in the hearing. "We once made the world believe that the Statue of Liberty is a future." The Congressional Budget Committee members who used to be aggressive at the hearing in order to cut NASA's budget now lowered their heads like defeated roosters and were embarrassed to meet the eyes of the dark-skinned old man. Secretary of State Kerry, who was sitting in the hearing committee seat, coughed lightly. "This is a congressional hearing, not a federal court. What we should discuss now is not who to hold accountable, but how to deal with it. I don't mean to hold anyone accountable, Mr. Kerry." Mr. Bolden glanced at Kerry, "But I must remind you that we should not make the same mistake twice." "What's your opinion?" asked Hillary, who was sitting in the hearing seat. "To expand NASA's budget, we must immediately start research on space elevator technology. Compared with China and Russia, we have a unique advantage in global influence. We can easily replicate a space elevator in the Atlantic. If the project is established, how much money do you need?" Hillary looked at Bolden and asked seriously, "I mean, from research and development to completion." Bolden turned to the last page of the manuscript, sniffed, and spoke quickly. "If we can get technical support from Future Group, the investment budget is about 20 billion to 40 billion. If we start with research and development, NASA needs 200 billion US dollars, and we can start construction by 2030 at the latest." The hearing committee members present looked at each other, and the faces of experts from all walks of life were also quite ugly. Hillary and Kerry looked at each other, and they saw the obvious disappointment in each other's eyes. "Help? How can we get help from Future Group? If this technology is mastered by more than 2 companies, then of course they will come to promote their own technology in order to obtain the US government's space elevator project order. However, there is only one company that has mastered the space elevator technology. How can being a contractor be more profitable than monopoly?" As for the $200 billion budget request, not to mention that Hillary would not nod her head, the budget committee at the hearing directly shot down the project. 200 billion. "Got, this money is enough for us to build 2 aircraft carrier battle groups." Sure enough, before Hillary spoke, a congressman from the opposition party said sarcastically, "Unless China continues to lend us money, where will the money come from? Do you expect taxpayers to pay for this whimsical project? This is not a whimsical project. Someone has secretly completed it some time ago." Bolden was about to say this, and an aerospace expert who was in a neutral position at the hearing said, "The United States also has a considerable number of private aerospace companies. We have used half a century to prove the enthusiasm and innovation of private enterprises. Instead of arguing here about unsolvable problems, why not ask SpaceX for its opinion? Bolden's face looked a little ugly. Ask SpaceX's opinion? What do you think SpaceX is? A magical conch? Long before the hearing began, he had already approached Elon Musk, the founder of SpaceX, to ask about the feasibility of building America's own space elevator. However, Elon Musk's answer made him feel deeply powerless. According to the intelligence that Starring Trade has released, if the United States wants to build a similar space elevator, it must first start with the most basic elevator materials. $200 billion. The things shown to the budget committee are always conservative estimates. After the hearing, Kerry and Hillary walked side by side in the direction of the garage. On the way, the two talked about the space elevator issue that had just been discussed fruitlessly. He doesn't care what impact Singapore's breakthrough in aerospace technology will have on the United States. He only cares about NASA's budget. You are an expert on international issues, Mr. Kerry. I want to hear your opinion. Hillary said expressionlessly. Kerry lowered his voice and said seriously, we can use the United Nations to put pressure on New Zealand. This is a big pie, and Russia and China should not give up on getting a piece of the pie from the space elevator. As long as we make a little concession when dividing the pie, they will agree to our proposal to jointly put pressure on Starring Trade. Outer space belongs to all mankind, and the space elevator, a global project, should also be shared by all mankind. Chapter 928 Guests from Afar. Although both reading and writing are called elevators, the base of this elevator is much wider than that of an ordinary high-rise building. However, even so, at a length of more than 30,000 kilometers, this vertically suspended elevator looks as slender as a noodle. Taking the Starring Trade warship, Jiang Chen boarded the sea base station of the space elevator. Not long after leaving the port, a group of people came towards him. We succeeded. When Jiang Chen returned to reality and saw Kerwin for the first time, this arrogant middle-aged man was as excited as a child and held his hand tightly. On the contrary, Jiang Chen seemed more stable. Compared with the excitement of witnessing the birth of a wonder and the excitement of leaving a name in history, at this moment, he felt more relieved that his wish had come true, and relieved for the distant future. Yes, we succeeded. Letting go of Kerwin's hand, Jiang Chen looked up at the space elevator and suddenly looked at the technical director standing next to Kerwin and asked, if I want to carve a line of words on the bottom of the space elevator, which pen is better? The technical director was stunned for a moment, then said, a laser welding gun will do. Help me get a laser welding gun. Although he didn't know what the chairman was thinking, the technical director still winked at the engineer next to him. Soon, a laser welding gun weighing 5 or 6 kilograms was handed to Jiang Chen. Jiang Chen took it and weighed it in his hand, which made Kerwin and the technical director standing next to him sigh in amazement. The chairman's hand strength is much greater than it looks to be able to hold this 5 or 6 kilogram welding gun in one hand. Walking to the side of the space elevator, Jiang Chen pressed the switch of the welding gun, and with the tip of the gun emitting a dazzling white light, he carved a line of square simplified Chinese characters on the titanium, alloy shell of the base of the space elevator. Taking 2 steps back, Jiang Chen looked at the line of words he had carved and nodded with satisfaction. I know we can solve the next problem, because we have solved all the problems that have arisen before. Kerwin, who had already learned Chinese, frowned and repeated the sentence again and again. He looked at Jiang Chen and asked, is there any deep meaning in this sentence? Nothing, just a souvenir. Jiang Chen laughed, turned off the power of the welding gun, and threw the welding gun back into the engineer's arms. Let's go, take me to see the elevator. Walking into the interior of the space elevator, Jiang Chen saw the entire space elevator track and its operating mechanism through the engineering holographic concept map displayed by Kerwin. There are a total of 6 passenger tracks, 3 of which go up, and the other 3 go down. The carriage will change tracks when it arrives at the terminal. Because of the one-way design of the single track, multiple carriages running at the same speed can run on one track at the same time. It can be foreseen that in the not too distant future, space activities will inevitably be quite frequent. People will take the space elevator to outer space, and it will even be as convenient as we take the high-speed rail today. This design can also be regarded as a plan for future rail traffic congestion. After the visit, Jiang Chen went to the cafeteria on the offshore platform to have lunch with the senior executives of the Space Launch Center, including Kerwin. At the dinner table, Jiang Chen asked Kerwin about the progress of the asteroid capture plan. The landing and net weaving work went very smoothly, but the orbit change work progressed slower than expected. Kerwin put down his fork and said with difficulty, although the supercomputing center has accurately calculated the orbit of the asteroid, it is still difficult to ensure the speed and orbit of the asteroid at the same time with current technical means. Every acceleration of the traction rocket is very critical. Even if it is wrong, it has to be recalculated. But the time left for the Bennu asteroid is not much. After mid-January, the asteroid will be farther and farther away from us. If we want to catch it again, we have to wait for 6 years. The person in charge of the asteroid capture plan sitting next to Kerwin interrupted. Jiang Chen expected so many difficulties. He could bring back technical information far ahead of his time from the end of the world, but he could not help these scientists and technicians digest these epoch-making technologies. Even in the 22nd century, asteroid mining is a cutting-edge discipline. Deploy explosives on the asteroid to ensure that, if it suddenly gets out of control, we can at least blow it up outside the atmosphere. We are already doing it. Kerwin said seriously. We have deployed 2.5 tons of TNT equivalent explosives on the Bennu asteroid. If the orbit change goes wrong, the remaining fuel in the rocket thruster is not enough to make it escape the capture of the Earth's gravity. We can detonate it into meteorite fragments when it approaches the exosphere. After lunch, Jiang Chen and Kerwin arrived at the Space Launch Center by boat. The launch site originally used to launch rockets has been idle after the completion of the space elevator. The transport ship that travels back and forth between the Earth and the Moon has been designed and is now in the experimental stage. At present, to deliver supplies to the lunar colony, the second stage rocket of the Starring 4 is directly sent to the synchronous orbit through the space elevator and then accelerated into the Earth-Moon transfer orbit. Since the first stage rocket and the fuel pushed to outer space are directly saved, the cost of traveling to and from the moon has been reduced by 60%. Starring Trade is studying the feasibility of expanding the scale of the lunar colony. If the plan is finally implemented, Starring Trade will send another 100 colonists to the moon. Just as Jiang Chen finished inspecting the situation of the lunar colony base, a call came to his watch. He turned on the watch and answered the call. Zha Xiao's voice immediately appeared in Jiang Chen's ears. Our guests have arrived. Oh, are they from China or Russia? Or from Washington? Jiang Chen asked with a pleasant face. They are guests from China. They have already landed at the airport in Koro City. The Minister of Commerce and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of New Zealand have gone to meet them. Their purpose is very clear. They hope to discuss the space elevator with us. Jiang Chen opened the holographic screen and checked the time. It was already past 5 o'clock. Since they have come from afar, let them rest for a day. By the way, have they contacted a place to stay? They have already booked a room at the Hilton Hotel in the heart of the ocean and are now on their way to the hotel. Zha Xiao replied. That's it for now. After speaking, Jiang Chen hung up the phone and cast his eyes on Kerwin. Has the nuclear fusion generator set been sent to the lunar colony? Yes, in the newly built power station, one of the nuclear fusion generators has been put into use to replace solar energy to power the lunar colony. In order to meet the needs of the nuclear power station, we need to build a heavy water plant to produce the deuterium needed for fusion reactions. Don't worry about it. I need you to prepare a report and send it to me before tomorrow afternoon. Report? What report? Kerwin looked at Jiang Chen in confusion. Regarding the transportation costs of the space elevator, I need you and your team to make an accurate assessment. We will use it in tomorrow's negotiations. Chapter 929 A small accident. Although it has been a while since they made their relationship clear, Zha Xiao still resists sleeping with him. This makes Jiang Chen a little depressed, as she was so relaxed that night. Aisha once asked Jiang Chen seriously if he needed her to force him, like she did last time. Well, Jiang Chen admitted that the proposal was very attractive, but he still reluctantly rejected Aisha's temptation. A forced melon is not sweet, and he is not sure whether this will cause Zha Xiao to be disgusted. Not everyone is a Ren like Aisha, who will only feel excited instead of disgusted by Jiang Chen's tough behavior. In the evening, when Jiang Chen returned home, it was almost 12 o'clock. After taking a shower and drying his wet hair, when he walked to the corridor on the second floor, he suddenly stopped, and his eyes fell on the bedroom door. Whose bedroom should I go to tonight? While thinking about this, Jiang Chen had already walked to Zha Xiao's door. He reached out to touch the door handle, but found that the door was locked. Jiang Chen was slightly stunned. "Are you tired?" Jiang Chen muttered quietly, then took back his hand from the doorknob and walked towards Aisha's room. The door was not locked. Rather, Jiang Chen stretched out his hand and gently pushed the door open. Judging from the bulge in the quilt, Aisha had fallen asleep. Thinking of this, Jiang Chen couldn't help but smile evilly and tiptoed over. The room was quiet, and the moonlight shone through the eaves into the room, adding a touch of brightness to the quiet and pretty face. The little Kyang nose wrinkled slightly, and the soft lips opened and closed with the rhythm of breathing. Looking at such a lovely sleeping face, a desire to protect her arose from the bottom of his heart. Jiang Chen, who originally had evil thoughts, hesitated slightly. "Forget it, let's try a gentler way today." Gently lifting a corner of the quilt, Jiang Chen lay down next to Aisha. He originally planned to fall asleep with her in his arms, but when he lay on her, Aisha murmured in her sleep and clung to him like a sloth. Jiang Chen lost all his sleepiness when his arms were pressed by the soft touch. The fire in his belly, which had been calming down for a while, was rekindled as if it had been doused with gasoline. "Why haven't you come back yet?" Yawning and hiding half of her face in the quilt, Zha Xiao secretly raised her eyes to the wall clock. When Jiang Chen was away, she had reached a sharing agreement with Aisha. Although it was a bit strange to apply the spirit of the contract in this regard, it seemed to be the best way to avoid conflict when there was no better solution. As for the future, she didn't want to think about it for the time being. However, as she was thinking about it, she watched time pass by, but she never waited for Jiang Chen to come back. After waiting for so long, she couldn't help but feel a little annoyed, and her little mouth under the quilt couldn't help but burst. She had been preparing for so long. Just like that, with a nervous heart, it was not until 2 o'clock in the morning that Zha Xiao could no longer hold on to her heavy tiredness and closed her eyelids that had been fighting for a long time. "This guy, why hasn't he come back yet?" she muttered softly, and her hands pulling the sheets slowly relaxed. The sound of even breathing floated out from under the quilt and gradually drifted away with the long night. The next morning, Jiang Chen stretched his body, rubbed his sleepy eyes, and climbed out of bed. Looking at the messy quilt, he couldn't help but smile. He got out of bed refreshed, put on his clothes, and went to the bathroom. After washing up, Jiang Chen met Zha Xiao, who was eating breakfast in the dining room. What made Jiang Chen feel strange was that she went to bed so early. Why did she still have faint dark circles under her eyelids? "Stay up late to play with your phone?" Jiang Chen asked with a smile as he sat next to Zha Xiao with a plate in his hand. Zha Xiao glared at him fiercely, snorted, and turned away from him. Jiang Chen looked at the back of her head in confusion, bewildered. Watching the two of them from the side, Aisha couldn't help but chuckle. Although last night was a complete accident, she knew very well why Zha Xiao was upset. Sure enough, in order to avoid such an accident, it would be better to tell him the timetable agreed with Sister Zha. Thinking of this, Aisha had silently sold Zha Xiao in her heart and strongly asked her not to tell Jiang Chen about the embarrassing agreement. This was to avoid accidents like last night, and Aisha even found a good reason for herself. Heart of the ocean, this giant building integrating shopping, dining, accommodation, and entertainment, is just like its name. This landmark building on the coast of Coral Island is like a pearl in the western Pacific Ocean. Since its completion, it has been overcrowded. In the presidential suite of the Hilton Hotel, a serious-looking old man with grey hair on his temples repeatedly flipped through the document in his hand. At this moment, the door was pushed open, and a woman in her 20s entered the room, walked to the side of the old man, and looked at the document in his hand with curiosity. "Grandpa, why are you not sleeping so late? What are you reading?" "I can't sleep." Yeking Hu sighed and put the document in his hand on the table. "We have Mr. Talent that we absolutely cannot miss. It has been so many years. Since your grandma passed away, I have never regretted something so much. The document he just read was Jiang Chen's file in China. This file records everything from his birth, enrollment, to graduation from Wanghei University. No matter how you look at it, he is just an ordinary young man in the file, and he is even the kind that you can't find in a crowd. Until one day in late summer of 2015, he registered an internet company in Wanghei City. His Future Man technology and the Future Man group that was later established swept the world at an incredible speed. If the Yi family had stepped forward to help him when the Wang family took action against Future Man technology. Shaking his head, Yi Qinghua didn't think about these unrealistic problems anymore. He had to sort out his thoughts now, because there was an important negotiation waiting for him in the afternoon. Not only China, but also the United States, Russia, Britain, and France are eyeing the space elevator cake. It only costs a few hundred Singapore dollars to send people into space. The economic value brought by this is definitely not as simple as saving tens of millions of dollars. No matter how reluctant countries are to admit it, this young man who is less than 30 years old has opened a new era. Standing next to the old man, Yi Yunfei didn't care. She just glanced at the photo on the document and retracted her gaze. At the age of 17, most people were in high school and worried about which university to apply for. She had already completed a degree in economics and management at Harvard University and started studying for a master's degree in economics and management. 2 years later, when her peers in China were still in military training in their freshman year, she had already begun to prepare for a master's degree at Harvard. Yi Yunfei did not slack off in her own training because she was born into a famous family. She can be said to be a model of self-reliance and self-improvement among the new generation of people from aristocratic families. In her opinion, the achievements of Future Group today are definitely not his own credit. This person is just lucky. She is even confident that, if she stands in the same position, she can undoubtedly do better than him. There was a little dissatisfaction in her heart, and she couldn't control it for a while. Yi Yunfei couldn't help but whispered what was in her heart. "You are so arrogant that you left us out for a whole day." As soon as she finished speaking, a sharp gaze came over, scaring her to stop talking. Although her grandfather always looked kind and gentle, she knew very well how terrible this kind-looking old man was when he got angry. The afternoon meeting is very important to the Yi family and even more important to the Republic. The chief trusted me, an old man, and sent me here. I know you are arrogant, look down on the nouveau riche, and are unwilling to accept it. But I tell you now, no matter how unwilling you are, hold it back. Yi Qinghua said sternly. Yi Yunfei lowered her head, but her mouth was pouting. Seeing that his granddaughter didn't speak, Yi Qinghua continued. Did you hear that? Yes. As if she had suffered a great injustice, Yi Yunfei squeezed out this word from her mouth reluctantly. However, in her heart, her impression of Jiang Chen, whom she had never met before, became even worse. Just because of him? He is just a guy who got lucky. What qualifications does he have to make me bow my head? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 930 Aerospace Defense Force. In the morning, in the Crescent Island military base, Jiang Chen found Ivan, the head of the military base, and talked to him about the establishment of an aerospace defense force. Establish an aerospace defense force. Ivan was slightly stunned by this new term, and subconsciously asked, what is that? It means literally. It may be changed to another name in the future, but it can be called this name for now. Jiang Chen said. But who are we defending? Even if the United States is the imaginary enemy, our missiles covering the entire United States are enough to make them afraid to act rashly. Ivan said. This is the significance of establishing such a force. Our Sky Defense Force can be deployed in any area on the Earth in just a few hours. Traditional air defense weapons will be meaningless when facing attacks from high orbits. It will make them no longer afraid to act rashly, but make them no longer have the courage to have evil thoughts. At this point, Jiang Chen looked at Mr. Ivan, who was stunned. How about it? Are you interested in witnessing this day? After suppressing his shock, Ivan took a deep breath, looked at Jiang Chen solemnly and said, "Of course, I look forward to seeing the hegemony of the United States fall in your hands." Ivan, a former Soviet soldier born in Ukraine, has more reason than anyone else to hate the country that once used conspiracy to destroy his motherland. Although the hatred has declined a lot with age, the desire to witness the fall of that country's hegemony is not false at all. Jiang Chen nodded. The Aerospace Defense Force, the so-called Defense Force, is just a cover. I need you to build an outright offensive force. Space-based weapons, high-orbit airborne troops, and an atmospheric laser array defense system. This is the blueprint for the construction of our special force. The Aerospace Defense Force plan will be the top secret of starring trade. Except for the high-orbit airborne troops, the rest of the sub-projects will be carried out in secret. I understand. Ivan nodded cautiously. Once this plan is made public, it will inevitably cause joint opposition from countries around the world. Even former allies and friendly countries in the same cultural circle will not hesitate to stand against the new country and try every means to obstruct the implementation of the plan. Using outer space for military purposes has always been a forbidden area for the international community. Even when the United States tried to promote the space-based weapons program, it encountered considerable resistance from both home and abroad. No one would like others to hold the sword of Damocles over their heads, which would make everyone uneasy. Unless everything becomes a fait accompli, even if other countries strongly oppose it, there is nothing they can do, and the new country has enough confidence to go its own way to the end. It will take a long time to complete the whole plan. I'm not in a hurry for you to produce results immediately. I would rather you take it slow, make the whole plan foolproof, and then start to implement it. At this point, Jiang Chen paused and continued, we can start with high-orbit airborne troops. Although we are confident that they can exert a power far greater than missiles, soldiers are not missiles after all, and should not cause strong opposition from various countries. Although it is not ruled out that someone will take advantage of the issue, using this force involving outer space to test the bottom line of the international community is a prudent and appropriate choice. Leave it to me. However, to form this force, our military must get the help of the Space Launch Center. Although Ivan is the CEO of Starring Trade, his power is actually limited to the military department of Starring Trade, and he cannot even interfere with logistics. The allocation of military supplies is the responsibility of the logistics department to which Bakary belongs. Clear division of labor among departments not only helps to improve the loyalty of the army, but also strengthens the combat effectiveness of the army. Only when everyone is in the position they are best at can the overall efficiency be maximized. In terms of the loyalty of the army, Jiang Chen will not completely leave it to the slave chip or personal charm to constrain. Only a set of efficient and strictly enforced systems can ensure the long-term and stable operation of an organization. I will tell Kerwin that the establishment of an aerospace defense force does not conflict with the interstellar colonization plan of the Space Launch Center, Jiang Chen said. After giving the order to establish the Sky Defense Force, Jiang Chen did not stay on Crescent Island for a long time. There was another meeting with the Chinese representative in the afternoon, and he had to go back to prepare a little. It is said that the person who came to Koro Island this time is a great man. Not only has he visited foreign countries with the #1 leader many times, but he has also shaken hands and talked with celebrities such as Ao Guanhei and Wallace. The old man Liu Xianggo only revealed 4 words to him, the Jiangnan Yi family, and then said no more. It is said that this Yi family is also a family of nobles in the Hangcheng area, very close to his hometown Hacheng. Jiang Chen had heard of the name of the Yi family, but that was just hearing about it. He knew that they were very powerful in the Jiangnan area, but he didn't know what kind of power they had. After all, his height at that time determined his vision. When he stood at a high enough position, his ability was enough to enable him to ignore everything he could only look up to. The visit from China this time was sent by Yi Qinghua, the current head of the Yi family and the old leader of the Central Committee who was about to retire. It might be to play the emotional card. After all, the Yi family is a prominent family in Jiangnan. If Jiang Chen is a nostalgic person, he might be a bit empathetic. In the reception room of the future building, Jiang Chen met this old man with grey hair on his temples. He was wearing a simple Zhongshan suit with a straight back and a vigorous and resolute walking posture. Although he was over 60 years old, he looked quite tough. Half a step behind him was a young and beautiful woman with a little light makeup on her beautiful face. A decent women's suit could not hide her beautiful appearance. I think he has received higher education, and the black framed glasses on his nose exude a faint intellectual aura. The grace and elegance that is deeply rooted in her bones belong to the ladies of a noble family, which is absolutely impossible for ordinary people to imitate. Mr. Jiang is very dignified. He has achieved so much at such a young age. He is indeed a role model for young talents in our Jiangnan area. After seeing Jiang Chen, Mr. Yi clapped his hands and smiled, not sparing his praise. Mr. Yi, you are too kind. Jiang Chen humbly cupped his hands and then looked at the woman behind him. Who is this? This is my assistant and my granddaughter, Old Yi said with a smile and led out the woman standing half a step behind him. Yunfei, meet you too. Because it was a private meeting, the Chinese side did not issue any documents for diplomatic visits. Instead, Prime Minister Liu and a certain number one figure greeted Jiang Chen separately, and Old Yi visited his fellow countryman Jiang Chen in a private capacity, so Old Yi did not stick to it, and directly stated that the assistant was his granddaughter. Yi Yunfei stepped forward and stretched out her delicate hand. Yi Yunfei, the second daughter of the Yi family. Mr. Jiang Chen, it's nice to meet you. Jiang Chen also stretched out his hand, smiled friendly, and nodded in response. I'm Jiang Chen, a businessman. Yi Yunfei just shook hands with Jiang Chen lightly, then let go of her hand and retreated behind the old man. I don't know why, although it was the first time they met, Jiang Chen always felt that his granddaughter seemed to be very cold to him, or even a little annoying. However, Jiang Chen did not take this trivial matter to heart, because the next negotiation would even be related to the future direction of the international situation. In front of such an important negotiation, any individual who exists alone is insignificant. Not to mention Yi Yunfei, even her grandfather, the big man who instructed her grandfather to visit, is the same. Even Jiang Chen. Anything related to domestic and central level official positions will not be written in the book to be harmonious. Chapter 931, Lease. No negotiation. Haha, Mr. Jiang, you're joking. Old Yi laughed. If Mr. Jiang is just a businessman, how can the thousands of businessmen in this world feel? Jiang Chen smiled, but did not respond. He raised his hand slightly and made a gesture of invitation. It's not appropriate to talk while standing. Please take a seat first, Mr. Yi. The three of them sat down at the tea table in the reception room. The waiter poured tea for Jiang Chen, Mr. Yi, and Yi Yunfei respectively, and then respectfully stepped aside. Yi Yunfei professionally took out a notebook and a pen from her briefcase and prepared to take minutes of the meeting. Seeing Jiang Chen sitting there alone, Old Yi was a little surprised. Although it was a private visit, the matter to be discussed later was related to the cooperative relationship between the two countries. Jiang Chen's attitude was still a little too informal. Out of good intentions, Old Yi reminded him, Mr. Jiang, don't you need an assistant to take minutes of the meeting? My assistant is already here. Jiang Chen smiled and nodded to the watch on his left hand, saying in a relaxed tone. Old Yi was slightly stunned, not understanding what he meant. Yi Yunfei, who was sitting next to his deputy, looked at Jiang Chen with a hint of disappointment. She had recognized his magnanimity just now, but now she saw how he treated such a high-level negotiation so frivolously, which instantly destroyed the positive image he had built up in her mind. Jiang Chen didn't pay any attention to what Yi Yunfei thought, but he saw through the confusion on Old Yi's face at a glance. Obviously, the old man didn't understand what he meant just now. Thinking of this, Jiang Chen smiled and reached out to click on his watch. The faint blue light and shadow intertwined and converged beside the watch, weaving a three-dimensional female holographic bust. Looking at Old Yi and Yi Yunfei with dull eyes, the artificial intelligence Jane nodded slightly. Jane, this is my name. Old Yi stared at everything that happened in front of him in amazement. Although he had heard a little about the holographic technology of future man technology, it was far less shocking than seeing it with his own eyes. Yi Yunfei's expression was no less than that at the moment. Although the future mobile phone she used produced by future technology, also had a built-in holographic imaging function. It could not achieve this level. This Ms. Jiang is my personal assistant. She is. It's artificial intelligence. Jiang Chen said with a smile. Mr. Yi nodded in understanding. He had recovered from his initial shock and smiled gently, saying, artificial intelligence? If it weren't for Mr. Jiang's reminder, I would have almost thought Miss Jiang was a real person. You are worthy of being the future technology that leads the world's technological forefront. What you come up with always shocks us. In the early days, Jiang Chen's future technology once designed a drone system for the military. To this day, the military still praises the system that has almost no obvious bugs. The Xianglong second high-altitude drone independently developed by China has maximized its performance advantages with the assistance of this intelligent control system. And today, when Mr. Yi saw this artificial intelligence gene who was almost indistinguishable from a real person, he couldn't help but sigh secretly. It seems that he underestimated him at the beginning. Thank you for the compliment. Jiang Chen smiled faintly. Let's get down to business. Mr. Yi nodded, and the smile on his face gradually faded, replaced by a formal expression. Since Mr. Jiang said so, then I won't beat around the bush. I came to visit you in New China this time for the space elevator you recently completed. Although China's space activities are not frequent and the market size is quite limited, we are quite interested in the amazing technology you have demonstrated. So, what is your proposal? Jiang Chen smiled. Mr. Yi cleared his throat and smiled kindly. We hope to cooperate closely with you in the development of space resources. After internal discussions, the cooperation plan we have developed is that we will establish the China Space Resources Development Company and sign an elevator track leasing agreement with the other party for 50 years, leasing 2 freight and passenger elevator tracks each for the purpose of space resource development. Lease 2 tracks each? Jiang Chen was really amazed by Mr. Yi's proposal. Although he did not expect to come up with any results on the first day, the cooperation plan proposed by Mr. Yi was too unrealistic. There are only 12 passenger and cargo tracks for the space elevator. You asked for 4 right away. How could they agree to you? In fact, it was not his fault that Mr. Yi made such a proposal. After all, it was a plan developed by the top leaders in an internal meeting. Nowadays, the space activities of various countries are not very frequent. Although they are optimistic about the prospects of space resource development, no one can estimate the exact number of this prospect. Seeing that Jiang Chen did not speak, Mr. Yi thought he was thinking, so he paused and then added, the price is negotiable. The number you gave is within a reasonable range. If there is anything you are not satisfied with in the cooperation plan we put forward, please point it out, and we can talk slowly. The silence lasted for a long time on the tea table. Yi Yunfei stopped writing with her pen, and frowned slightly at Jiang Chen who was silent. In her opinion, the conditions proposed by her grandfather were already quite generous, and he also lowered his posture, to come to new country, to discuss this matter with him in person. She didn't understand what he was dissatisfied with. After a moment of silence, Jiang Chen opened his mouth, but did not speak. Finally, he sighed and broke the silence in the reception room. It seems that we can only talk slowly. Hearing Jiang Chen's words, Mr. Yi frowned slightly. Oh. It seems that Mr. Jiang is dissatisfied with many aspects of the agreement. You might as well bring up our differences. We have a big disagreement about the agreement itself. Jiang Chen leaned back in his chair and spread his hands. Starring Trade has never intended to lease a space elevator, even one of its tracks. We are willing to provide cheap outer space transportation services to all countries. This is also the only service we sell at present. There are only 12 tracks in total, 6 for cargo and 6 for passenger transport. There are 5 permanent members of the Security Council. You rent 4, and he rents 4. If it is divided like this, the space elevator built by Starring Trade will not be enough to share. Starring Trade will never lease tracks in any form, and it must not open this loophole. Jiang Chen's words made Mr. Yi's expression a little stiff. Just as Jiang Chen didn't expect them to propose a lease agreement, he also didn't expect Jiang Chen to reject it so decisively. In his opinion, this plan studied by the central government was already quite worthy of them. But Mr. Yi didn't get angry. After all, he knew that he was negotiating with a foreign company. However, just as he was about to speak, Yi Yunfei, who had been taking notes, suddenly spoke. I wonder if Mr. Jiang knows one thing, that the United Nations is currently preparing to hold a high-level summit on the development of outer space. Yunfei. The old man glared at his granddaughter and signaled her to shut up. However, this time Yi Yunfei did not give in, but stared at Jiang Chen, trying to detect a trace of fear in his pupils. This is a negotiation skill her teacher taught her. At the negotiation table, there is only one way to expand one's advantage, that is, to seize the opponent's weakness and force the other party to make concessions on non-core interests. And how to seize the opponent's weakness depends on the chips in the hands of both parties and the art of negotiation. Although she was the second daughter of the Yi family and lived a life that was like being born with a silver spoon in her mouth in the eyes of others, she never thought that this was something to be envied. She received an aristocratic education since she was a child, and her fate when she grew up was already determined. For the benefit of the family, she married a strange man and raised children for a person she did not love at all for the rest of her life. She originally thought that she could get rid of this destined fate by obtaining a master's degree from Harvard. However, when she returned to China and accidentally heard that her father was going to marry her to the unpromising youngest son of the Zhao family, she almost fell into despair. She did not want to be a puppet manipulated by the family and let the family manipulate her fate. In order to do this and gain true freedom, she must achieve enough results to prove herself and prove that her ability is far more than just a reproductive tool for political marriage. The results here do not refer to TOEFL, SAT or Harvard University degree certificates. For a prestigious family like the Yi family, these titles are just titles. And the reason why she begged her grandfather to take her to the new country and participate in the negotiations as an assistant was to prove herself, forcing Jiang Chen to make concessions in the negotiations and gaining an advantage for the country in the originally deadlocked negotiations. What could be better than this to prove one's ability? Moreover, in her opinion, this was too easy. She did not see any elite qualities or knowledge in Jiang Chen at all. Although he was able to be calm and composed when talking with his grandfather, it was just the arrogance of a newborn calf who was not afraid of a tiger. He had not received any top-notch education, nor had he been influenced by any high-level culture. Such a rough man, even if he was placed in the position of chairman of a company with a market value of hundreds of billions, was just a simple-minded upstart. If he did not have a group of capable subordinates, could he have achieved what he has today? Thinking of this, Yi Yunfei's mouth curled up with a triumphant smile. China is one of the permanent members of the Security Council. Mr. Jiang should know what this means. In addition, the conditions we can offer are definitely much more favorable than those offered by the Americans. If it were the Americans who came to negotiate, I'm afraid they would not ask for a lease. Yi Yunfei stopped talking after that. She just smiled at Jiang Chen. The interests had been made clear. In her opinion, she had already won. However, she was destined to be disappointed. Jiang Chen did not show any fear. Instead, he looked at her with a playful look. So, chapter 932. So what? Verbal threats are the weakest weapon, especially at higher levels of negotiation. When Yi Yunfei used a threatening tone, intentionally or unintentionally, and pointed out the upcoming UN summit on the rational development of outer space, she was hinting at one point, if you don't cooperate, we won't cooperate when we discuss the space elevator issue at the summit. But would Jiang Chen be afraid of this? Even if the United Nations ordered him to hand over the space elevator and let the international community jointly manage it, he had the right to refuse. What's more, the United Nations would not make such a shameless resolution. First, there is no legal basis, and second, it is impossible to set a precedent for this robbery. Jiang Chen attaches great importance to the upcoming UN summit, because it is enough to represent the attitude of the international community, but he has not yet attached enough importance to the extent of making concessions on his vital interests for this summit. That has not yet been held. So what? Jiang Chen asked lightly, causing Yi Yunfei's expression to freeze on her face. So if you know what's good for you, you'd better cooperate with us. The lease of the space elevator is the bottom line of our negotiation. The price can be negotiated, but the principle cannot be negotiated. However, this sentence, which has been organized into a sentence in her brain, froze in her throat. A drop of cold sweat slid down her temples, cooling her feverish brain instantly. If this sentence is really said, the negotiation between the two sides will almost come to a showdown. It is good to draw a bottom line for yourself too early and make the threat clear without leaving any room for negotiation. But if it fails, then it will really be a showdown. Of course, she would not be stupid enough to judge whether Jiang Chen is really afraid of this bargaining chip through his expression, but the calmness Jiang Chen showed made her unsure. What should I do? Showdown now? But the negotiations have just begun. Isn't it too early? And if it fails, this responsibility. The second drop of cold sweat slid down, and Jiang Chen looked at Yi Yunfei with a smile, exerting pressure on her intentionally or unintentionally. Seeing his granddaughter's tense face and indecisive look, Yi Leo sighed secretly. He knew his granddaughter's temperament very well. She has some ability, but she is too arrogant. She is too eager for quick success. Her situation is not unique. The younger generations in the clan who have returned from studying abroad are more or less like this. They think that they have learned a lot of knowledge outside and can do a lot after returning. Originally, he thought that, since she had already interrupted, he would give her this opportunity to finish her words and see if she can do something. But looking at her current state, Elder Yi knew very well that he could not wait any longer. Anyway, her task had just been completed. Standing up on his own initiative, Elder Yi bowed to Jiang Chen. Let's stop here today. Since you have objections to the cooperation method itself, continuing the discussion will surely not produce any results. I also need to ask for instructions from the higher-ups, and I hope Mr. Jiang can understand. Having said this, Elder Yi paused and continued apologetically. I'm sorry for my daughter's abruptness. She is only an assistant and does not have any diplomatic authorization. I hope Mr. Jiang will not take her words to heart. Her words do not represent China's position. No matter what the outcome of the negotiations is, China and your side are in the same interests. We attach great importance to our friendly relations and blood relationship with you. Mr. Yi's words were very interesting. Although he did not make any promises, he brought the two sides closer. He subtly emphasized the blood relationship between the two sides and laid a friendly foundation for the subsequent negotiations between the two sides. It's okay, I don't take it to heart at all, Jiang Chen said with a smile. Without looking at Yi Yunfei with a complicated expression, he politely sent the two to the outside of the future building. After watching the black car go away, Jiang Chen returned to the reception room and sat back in his seat. There was a little hot air lingering above the teacup. Because the negotiations ended not long after they started, the three people did not even have the opportunity to touch the tea on the table. Looking at the rising white mist, Jiang Chen repeatedly recalled the details of the previous negotiations, and a hint of enlightenment suddenly appeared on his face. This old man is not simple. Oh. Why do you say that? Zha Xiaoyu, who had finished her work, walked into the reception room and sat next to Jiang Chen, asking with interest. He knows his granddaughter best. I'm afraid that his granddaughter would say such words at the negotiation table. Even if he didn't instruct her, it was within his expectation. Jiang Chen said thoughtfully. If there was no special purpose, how could he bring a novice assistant to participate in such a level of negotiation? Anyone with a little experience would not make such a reckless statement. I think Yi Qinghe is also using Yi Yunfei's mouth to weigh the weight of the bargaining chip of the United Nations Summit. However, he is destined to be disappointed. Jiang Chen will never agree to lease the orbit of the space elevator. Starring trade is not short of money, and it will not be short of money in the future. Cooperation? Of course, it is welcome, but this so-called cooperation does not include renting the space elevator itself. What are you going to do in the next negotiation? Zha Xiaoyu poured herself a cup of tea, took a sip, looked at Jiang Chen and asked, in your plan, China is an indispensable part. Yes, but not entirely. Jiang Chen leaned back in his chair, a confident smile on his face. There is no rush to negotiate with China. They will never give up their interests in outer space easily, and they will never ignore what the space elevator means and the prospects for the development of space resources. There is only one space elevator, and there will only be this one in the next few decades. The initiative in the negotiations is on our side. There is no doubt about that. The use of a space elevator is definitely not as simple as making satellite launches cheaper. Our asteroid capture plan has reached the most critical time point, and the scientific research team led by Kerwin is making the final adjustments to the asteroid artificial orbit change plan. Most of the production lines of the Electric Ray X-1 aerospace plane have also been completed in the Anger Island Industrial Park, and the first unit manufactured by industrial-grade 3D printing according to the drawings has entered the testing phase. The next step is asteroid mining. We will hollow out the entire Bennu asteroid. Then we will use tons of ore to completely destroy the Jewish consortium whose economic pillar is the monopoly of traditional mining. In the face of our unimaginably cheap ore, the Brazilian Vale company controlled by Rothschild will go bankrupt. At this point, Jiang Chen stopped talking and smiled at Xia Xiaoyu. Sorry, I've gone off topic. Xia Xiaoyu smiled and took a sip of the teacup elegantly. It's okay. You look handsome when you're confident. Really? Jiang Chen was slightly stunned. Then he touched his face seriously. I thought I was always handsome. Puff, cough cough. Her shoulders shook violently, and Xia Xiaoyu covered her mouth with the back of her hand and coughed, and put down the teacup with the other hand. She was really amused by Jiang Chen's laughter. She couldn't hold it back for a moment, and laughed out loud while drinking tea, and she almost choked. Jiang Chen didn't expect her to have such a low sense of laughter, so he quickly reached out and patted her back. After she recovered, he asked with concern, "Are you feeling better?" Xia Xiaoyu rolled her eyes at Jiang Chen unhappily, took out a handkerchief to wipe the water stains at the corners of her mouth, and returned to her dignified and serious look at the beginning. "Okay, let's get down to business. Natasha called me just now and said that her work in Moscow has ended early and she will be back tomorrow." Jiang Chen was slightly moved and his expression became serious. "That is to say?" Xia Xiaoyu nodded. "That's right. Russia has also set its sights on the space elevator. Natasha's sudden return at this time is probably also for this matter. And this is exactly what Xia Xiaoyu is worried about. She heard that Natasha and Jiang Chen have a good personal relationship. If Russia plays the emotional card, that is to say, in the future at home, you have to be more restrained." Jiang Chen frowned. Xia Xiaoyu looked at Jiang Chen, who was full of regret, speechlessly. She planned to pretend not to know this frivolous guy for 10 minutes. Chapter 933, Hunting Asteroids. Engine number 8 ignited. Ignition completed. The asteroid has successfully entered the C2 orbit. The fourth orbit change will be carried out in 10 minutes. All units prepare. The tense atmosphere in the Space Launch Center relaxed. Everyone, including Kerwin, slowly relaxed their tightly clenched fists. There was even a small cheer. Every orbit change is a great challenge for the Space Launch Center with zero experience. But soon, everyone's fists were clenched again. The next orbit change will be carried out in 10 minutes. They have no time to rest before all the orbit change work is completed. Received. Parameters entered and confirmed correct. Slow down the number 3 engine. Increase the output power of the number 6 engine by 10%. If you want to describe how difficult this project is, it is like using a steel wire to operate a scalpel and perform surgery on a patient several kilometers away. Except for a few orbits where the asteroid stays for a long time, Kerwin can hardly close his eyes during the rest of the time. Unless he is really tired, he will let his assistant take over his shift for a while. Finally, the Bennu asteroid has successfully entered the D1 orbit from the C2 orbit. The rocket engines of each group have been successfully shut down. The next orbit change will be in 10 hours. I hope to see all of you at your posts at 2 o'clock. Now, except for the monitoring team, disband and rest. There was no cheering. All the staff members breathed a sigh of relief, simply packed up the things on the table, and walked out the door. Now they just want to go to the cafeteria to eat, then take a shower, and then lie on the bed to sleep. It is still 8 hours before 2 o'clock. This time they can sleep a little longer. I don't know when the next time will be. Kerwin rubbed his brows and sat on the chair. In order to stay focused, he stood and directed the scene throughout the whole process. Now that the asteroid has successfully changed its orbit, his whole body is like a taut string, and it has relaxed. Walking to Kerwin's side, His assistant handed him a cup of coffee. Have a cup of coffee. No, it will keep me awake. After declining the coffee handed by the assistant, Kerwin continued to sit in his seat for a while, then stood up and walked out the door. It has already entered the D1 orbit. After 5 more orbit changes, the asteroid will be completely integrated into the Earth-Moon system. This work is simply torture. The fatigue he has accumulated in this week is almost catching up with the fatigue accumulated in the space elevator project last year. This kind of thing is only done once, and it is better to let the assistant do it next time. With this practical experience, he has already conceived a sketch in his mind about the establishment of an asteroid mining project department, the division of labor between departments, and the division of the entire project into systematic steps. When he walked to the door of the cafeteria, he ran into Ivan, who was in charge of the military department. Looking at the Ukrainian with some surprise, Kerwin walked up to say hello. Ivan? Why are you here? Wait for you here. Ivan grinned, gestured to the secretary next to him, and handed a document to Kerwin, starring trade plans to establish an aerospace defense force, and our military needs the help of your space launch center. This project was approved by the chairman himself. You'd better take a look. Just send it to my assistant. It would be embarrassing for you to come here in person. Kerwin smiled and shook his head, stretched out his hand to take the document, but when he saw the mark on the cover, he was stunned, and his originally drowsy brain suddenly woke up. S-level secret? This is also the reason why I came here in person. Ivan said solemnly. The content of the document involves the highest level of secrets of starring trade, and only you can read the content inside. I see. Kerwin nodded with a serious expression. After explaining this matter, Ivan left quickly. Kerwin looked at the document in his hand, then looked at the cafeteria, and finally sighed, shook his head, and turned to walk towards the office. Forget it. I'll ask my assistant to bring me a sandwich. I guess I won't be able to have lunch. Kelvin took out his cell phone while muttering. As a senior executive of starring trade, he certainly knew how important S-level secrets were. Now all he needed to do was to take a quick look at the document and then put it into his safe that could only be opened with fingerprints and irises. At the Koro Island airport, a civil airline landed on the runway. A tall Russian beauty walked through the airport lobby with a suitcase and stopped at the airport gate, attracting the attention of countless tourists and passengers going to the terminal. It's not that no one mustered up the courage to come forward and chat with her in various ways. It's just that this beauty was not even interested in responding to these strangers who came to chat with her. A black car stopped at the airport gate. The Russian beauty's eyes lit up, and her long golden hair raised a beautiful shadow. She immediately walked forward with the suitcase. This scene made the men who were ready to approach and chat up the woman envious, and they all cast their jealous eyes towards the plain-looking car. The most annoying thing was that the man in the car actually sat there from beginning to end, and it was the beautiful woman who put the suitcase into the trunk of the car herself. Countless people who couldn't eat grapes and said that the grapes were sour began to complain. How blind can you be to like such an ungentlemanly man? Fuck, another flower stuck in cow dung. However, whether it was the plain-looking car or the blonde beauty, it was obvious that they didn't take these people's little thoughts seriously. Soon the car drove onto the road and disappeared from the sight of the crowd of ****, leaving countless people who failed to chat up with them shaking their heads in regret. Of course, if these people knew who was sitting in the car, I'm afraid all of them would swallow their words. I didn't expect you to drive to pick me up in person. I thought it would be your little follower. Fasten the seatbelt, Natasha asked jokingly. Anyway, I'm free today, and I promised you. Jiang Chen said casually while starting the car. It is said that it is inconvenient for people with big breasts to wear seatbelts, and Natasha perfectly illustrates this point at this moment. Where is your Lamborghini? I drive it less now. Why? Natasha looked over curiously and asked. I always feel that I'm past that age. Jiang Chen smiled. What brand is this car? Why haven't I seen it before? Ralka GT300, a brand I invested in myself. Pure electric car? No wonder the noise is so low. Natasha looked at the layout of the car. In Russia, only sissies drive pure electric cars. Jiang Chen's eyebrows twitched, and he glanced at Natasha, who was looking at him with a smile, and continued to concentrate on driving. Is this car shell made of titanium alloy? Natasha knocked on the car door with her knuckles and asked casually. Super plastic steel? PVC profile? It's not that kind of stuff. Jiang Chen shook his head. In simple terms, even if the car body is hit by an RPG-7 rocket or a Barrett sniper rifle, the passengers inside the car will be safe and sound. I always feel that you have changed, Natasha suddenly said. Changed? Jiang Chen was slightly stunned and looked at her in confusion. I feel you are much more mature than before. Of course, it may be my illusion. Natasha shrugged and said bluntly. Jiang Chen smiled and shook his head. Everyone will grow from young to mature and finally old. What's more, I have experienced twice as much life as you. Hearing Jiang Chen's words, Natasha laughed out loud, but when she heard the latter part, she was slightly stunned. Twice? Not necessarily. Time is equal to everyone. Really? Jiang Chen just smiled and didn't answer. It has only been more than 3 years since he got the bracelet, but he felt that 10 years have passed in his heart. I guess only he himself can understand the real meaning behind this sentence. Chapter 934 Yi Leo's thoughts. After dragging the suitcase into the house, Natasha looked around the villa and asked abruptly, are you together? Jiang Chen had no intention of hiding it, so he nodded and admitted, yes. A lot of things happened during the time you returned to Moscow. Huh, I can't tell. Natasha looked at Jiang Chen in surprise and said with a playful expression, I thought you would continue to be ambiguous. What do you mean by continue to be ambiguous? Jiang Chen glanced at her. Speaking of which, how did you find out? After all, I'm a former KGB agent. Natasha shrugged, suddenly moved her face a few inches closer to Jiang Chen, smiled. What's more, I'm a woman. I see. I almost forgot. Jiang Chen pretended to realize something, and Natasha was so angry that she glared at him fiercely. Although she had been back in Russia for a while, Jiang Chen had always kept her room for her, and Aisha occasionally cleaned it for her. After helping her carry the suitcase into the room, Jiang Chen ignored her and went to the Angia Island Industrial Park. This morning, Yang Guanglai, the CEO of Future Man Heavy Industry, sent him a text message through the internal office software of Future Man Group. The first unit of the electric ray X1 produced by the Angia Island Industrial Park has completed the initial test. If nothing goes wrong, it will be sent into synchronous orbit by the space elevator with 60 passengers participating in the first passenger carriage on the day of the United Nations Outer Space Summit in 5 days. It will be driven by professionally trained astronauts, carrying a transport module with 5 kilograms of deuterium and several tons of Earth food, and complete the round-trip flight between the giant space station of Starring City and the lunar colony. Although 80% of the parts are completed by industrial-grade 3D printers, this also marks that the Angia Island High-Tech Industrial Park has the ability to produce 22nd century equipment. In order to achieve this, Jiang Chen spent 2 years. Although the first round of contact with Starring Trade ended in failure, Yi Qinghe was not discouraged. In a sense, he expected such a situation. Can a negotiation that does not start with a big opening be called a negotiation? If such a large project could be negotiated in one go, he would think Jiang Chen had set a trap for him. However, Jiang Chen's tough attitude in rejecting the orbital lease contract was beyond the expectations of Mr. Yi and the central high-level officials far away in China. 12 orbits, with the current aerospace market activities, do not need so many. In China's view, Starring Trade should not reject this proposal. It seems that we still underestimate the market prospects of space resource development and the ambition of Jiang Chen. Future Group is an expert in this field. As the saying goes, every profession has its own specialty. They should be able to see further in this regard. After calling his granddaughter Yi Yunfei to reprimand her, Mr. Yi let her go and gave her a short vacation. Her mission was to test Jiang Chen's bottom line at the negotiation table and the weight of her own bargaining chips in the other party's heart. Although for her personally, she was destined to gain nothing from this trip to the new country. Although Elder Yi felt a little guilty for using the younger generation, family interests were nothing compared to national interests, not to mention family affection. At most, he could talk to Yi Xianrong when he returned and ask him not to embarrass his daughter on that marriage. Although the boy surnamed Xiang was in the limelight, he was nothing compared to the Yi family in Jiangnan. Since Yanfei didn't like the boy, let it go. This was also compensation for her. When people get old, they will eventually be soft-hearted towards the younger generation. Shaking his head, Elder Yi put aside the matter of his granddaughter and looked at the photo on the table. This was taken by his bodyguard at the airport. The Russian woman holding a suitcase in the photo was Natasha, whom Jiang Chen had brought home from the airport. A former senior KGB agent, he was active in the Russian-Ukrainian border area before retiring and first came into contact with Jiang Chen there. His resume shows that he had participated in hot events such as the Georgian War and the Crimean Crisis. How could such a person get involved with Jiang Chen? Mr. Yi frowned slightly, puzzled. It is no secret that Jiang Chen controls a special intelligence force in intelligence organizations of various countries. He should know that the Russian beauty who lives in his house once served in the Russian intelligence agency. Could it be true as rumored? Mr. Yi touched his chin and fell into deep thought. According to the intelligence analyzed by the general staff, Jiang Chen's private life is far from being as low-key as is commonly circulated on the internet. Not only did he maintain a lover relationship with a small domestic star, but it is also rumored that the female bodyguard who has been following him is also his mistress. There is even a saying that as early as when Jiang Chen was still in Wanghai City, he maintained an ambiguous relationship with his right-hand man, Zha Xiaoyu. Not only that, it is said that he has a lover who has not yet graduated from college in the villa he bought in Tokyo, Japan. If he is really a womanizer, it is good news for us. Yi Leo's eyes flickered with a gleam of brilliance. Although he and the people above no longer fantasize about persuading him to return to China for development, they would not mind having several ties that maintain a close relationship with him. And marriage is a good choice, whether it is for the country or for their Yi family. Thinking of this, Yi Qinghua's mind suddenly emerged with a frustrated granddaughter who was scolded by him before. Although Yi Yanfei may have left a bad impression on Jiang Chen at the negotiation table, there is no deep hatred between the two. It is better to have an impression than no impression at all. If we can use some tricks to bring the two of them together. Thinking of this, Yi Leo's turbid eyes gradually brightened. In terms of appearance, he is confident that his second son's daughter, even if she can't be called a beauty that topples the country, is definitely a disaster-level beauty embryo. Not only is she beautiful, she has also received an excellent aristocratic education. Whether it is personal talents such as piano, chess, calligraphy and painting, or a degree from Harvard, it is far beyond the reach of ordinary talented women. Although she is a little arrogant in her bones, this shortcoming can be completely ignored in the face of many advantages. As the saying goes, a flaw does not hide the merits. This is the truth. As for Jiang Chen's private life, he doesn't care at all. Even if Jiang Chen wants to constitutionally restore polygamy in his little kingdom, even if Jiang Chen will not devote any marital affection to her after marriage, in the face of national interests, so-called personal feelings have never been important. And the strength demonstrated by future group and starring trade is enough for the Yi family to put aside their traditional reserve and sacrifice the personal happiness of a certain clan member. It's hard for Yanfei. Old Yi sighed, pondered for a moment, reached out and picked up the phone, and called his second son Li Xianrong, who was the provincial secretary general. There is no need to ask for instructions on this matter, but he must first talk to Yanfei's father. Regardless of whether this marriage can be negotiated, Yanfei's ideological work must be done well. It is indeed a bit difficult for her to let her put aside her prejudices and approach a man she doesn't love at all. But old Yi believes that she will definitely understand the painstaking efforts of him and her father. Chapter 935, Serious Illness. HU. Jiang Chen sneezed suddenly as the sea breeze blew in his face. Seeing Jiang Chen sneeze, Aisha took the coat from the side and put it on his shoulders. Squeezing Aisha's hand on his shoulder, Jiang Chen turned around and smiled. No, I won't catch a cold. After being injected with a gene drug, his immunity was even enough to ignore the X1 bacterial infection. He hasn't felt the feeling of fever and cold for a long time. But, you're sneezing. You'd better pay attention. Aisha whispered. I guess someone is thinking about you. Jiang Chen smiled and shrugged, tightening the coat that Aisha put on him. How is the situation in Europe? We helped the Russians transport weapons into Germany, and the Russians are still negotiating with the rebels about the budget for the operation. Our people are still tracking the whereabouts of Carmen and the new high-level Freemasons, but they have done a very strict security work. Even with the help of the KGB, our progress is quite slow. Aisha lowered her head and said with some regret. Jiang Chen reached out his hand, touched the little girl's head, and smiled to comfort her. Don't be depressed, we have plenty of time to do this. The richer the person, the more afraid of death, including Jiang Chen. Since he was attacked by a psychic on the way home last time, he has not been threatened in terms of security, but the ghost agent has solved all the troubles without his knowledge. In the end, what was presented to him was just a report. There are too many people who want to kill him, including the remnants of the Black Ship, the Freemasons, and business rivals. The same is true for Carmen Rothschild. The enemies of the Freemasons are not just the future group, so he can't be careless. Tell me about the situation in Russia. How are their negotiations with the rebels going? Jiang Chen asked. The person in charge of negotiating with those rebels is a local German chocolate manufacturer. The Just Act that nominally supports Germany's retreat from the brink of extremism is supported by local German entrepreneurs, but in fact the source of funds is a hidden account of Gazprom. Have you got the evidence? Jiang Chen asked thoughtfully. Aisha nodded. Monica Geller monitored their phone calls. Although they used a lot of code words, we can decipher the general meaning of the code words with our investigation technology. Jiang Chen had heard of Monica Geller from Aisha before. She was one of the main agents of ghost agents who had been active in Western Europe for a long time. Her codename was Guinevere, which came from a queen in the legend of ancient England. After hearing Aisha's answer, Jiang Chen's mouth curled up with a satisfied smile and rubbed her hair that was blown by the wind. Although New China and Russia are allies in many aspects, this is not enough to be a reason for Jiang Chen to be unreserved. Even if they are allies, they have to keep a hand in key places. Having evidence of collusion between German insurgents and Russian intelligence agencies does not mean that Jiang Chen will definitely use it in the future, but when necessary, it may play an unexpected role. Seeing the smile on Jiang Chen's face, Aisha also smiled happily and rubbed her face against his big hand meekly. She enjoyed the warmth and the smile on her beloved's face, especially when she knew that this smile was her own achievement. The happiness that came from her chest filled her whole body with motivation. Jiang Chen, who had inspected the high-tech industrial park, returned to Koro Island from Anger Island. Although the undersea highway is now open to traffic, he still occasionally chooses a yacht as a means of transportation. On the one hand, he can enjoy the comfort of the sea breeze, and on the other hand, he can stop the boat at any time when he encounters a school of fish and catch 2 seafood to take home for a snack. After all, the fish bought in the market are not as good as those caught by himself. After getting off the boat on Koro Island, Jiang Chen answered a call on the way back to the villa. It looked like an unfamiliar number. Hello. There was silence on the other end of the phone for a long time, and a stiff female voice came after a while. Hello, I'm Yi Yunfei. Yi Yunfei? Jiang Chen frowned slightly, thought for a moment, and suddenly remembered the name. It seems that she is the granddaughter who followed the old man Yi Qinghe a few days ago. But why did she call me? What's the matter? Jiang Chen asked politely. When Jiang Chen paused for 2 or 3 seconds, Yi Yunfei immediately realized that Jiang Chen had forgotten her name, and her pair of silver teeth clenched together. However, when she thought of what her father and grandfather said to her, a trace of humiliation flashed between her eyebrows. In the end, she took a deep breath, suppressed the 10,000 dissatisfactions in her heart, and spoke in a calm tone. Can we come out and talk? I want to treat you to a meal. I was abrupt last time. I want to apologize to you in person. Oh, that matter. Don't mind. I didn't take it to heart. Let's have dinner another day. I don't have time now. Yi Yunfei was stunned. No time. She had seen too many men who coveted her beauty, driving luxury cars, and holding flowers to her downstairs, using candles to form a heart, playing guitar and singing love songs, and pursuing his men in various ways. I invited him to treat me to a meal, and he actually, seeing that there was no sound on the other end of the phone for a while, Jiang Chen frowned slightly, thinking that she had put down the phone, so he hung up the phone casually. Yi Yunfei was about to say something, but she heard a busy tone in her ear, and she was stunned. You actually hung up on me? Shame and anger climbed from her neck to her forehead. She gritted her teeth, and slammed the phone on the pillow. Humph. It's so infuriating. Even the real estate CEOs with a market value of hundreds of billions or hundreds of billions in China are all respectful when they meet her. She has never been treated like this before, and it's nothing more than being angry. Yi Yunfei doesn't understand that those who pursue her are never just going for her, but for the Jiangnan Yi family behind her. If she loses this halo, will those people still flock to her? Beauty? Talent? There are so many people who have all of these at the same time. Even his father's mistress can show off 1 or 2 diplomas from prestigious universities or some mysterious international 30 qualification certificates. The market value of Future Group is not as high as that of Apple in public, but that is because Future Group is not listed and does not need to borrow money from banks. By hyping up its market value, anyone who has been in deep contact with Future technology will not doubt the terrifying profitability of Future Group. In the eyes of most ordinary people, it is just an ordinary multinational group. Just like most ordinary people, they don't even know that there is only one person actually controlling Future Group and starring trade. They mistakenly think that the new country with a universal suffrage system is a democratic country and believe that Zhang Yaping can become president entirely because of his ability to govern. Yi Yunfei is a junior of the Yi family. She has not been exposed to the cool air. She has only studied abroad for a few years and has high expectations. Naturally, she doesn't understand these things. She just regards Jiang Chen as the boss of a large multinational company and a businessman with a lot of money. If he is just rich, he will not be in the eyes of her family at all. Although she understood the painstaking efforts of her father and grandfather, endured the frustration in her heart, lowered her posture, and took the initiative to contact Jiang Chen, she did not understand the most crucial point. Unlike the CEOs of those domestic groups with a market value of hundreds of billions or hundreds of billions, and unlike those overseas Chinese businessmen who are eager to squeeze into the huge domestic market, let alone her, even the halo of the Yi family that she was staring at was nothing in Jiang Chen's eyes. The political bigwig sitting in Liu's house had to be polite when talking to him. So what was her Yi family? To put it bluntly, this kind of person has princess syndrome. And the disease is not mild. Chapter 936 Portlease. In the lounge next to the training ground on Crescent Moon Island, soldiers who had just finished live fire shooting training were taking a shower and putting on clothes from their storage boxes. At this time, everyone noticed that there was a poster on their storage boxes. The poster showed a spaceship, a soldier holding a rifle and wearing heavy armor, and the background was Mars. Zhang Feng was not sure if it was Mars, but looking at the bare surface of the planet, it was definitely not the Earth. Aerospace Defense Force. What is this? After tearing off the poster, Zhang Feng rubbed his wet short hair with a towel on his shoulders, sat on the bench next to him, and carefully looked at the small words on the poster. Maybe this is a newly released movie. The Mexican machine gunner in his team walked over and leaned closer. How did those people who posted advertisements get in? This is a military restricted area. Use your brain to think about it, Jack. A big hand patted the old Mexican on the shoulder, and the rifleman Liu Dunteo grinned. Since this is a military restricted area, the people who posted advertisements must be ours. I posted the advertisements, of course. They were printed by the headquarters. A man in military uniform walked into the lounge and took the hat left on the locker. You'd better pay attention to it. It's a good thing. After that, the officer from the logistics department turned and left. Several soldiers were stunned and looked at each other. I heard that starring trade is working on an interstellar colonization plan, and I thought they were just joking. Shit, it seems like they are serious. We have a chance to change from the Marine Corps to the Galaxy Marines. Fighting in outer space? That's so cool. Great. Fighting aliens whose existence we don't know is better than fighting with Earthlings. Shit, so you're planning to be a deserter? I can't just listen to that. Ignoring his teammates bragging, Zhang Feng carefully read the words on the promotional advertisement. To be honest, he was not very interested. After all, he was now the captain of the Marine Corps, leading a team of 6. No one knew what the nature of this newly established aerospace defense force was, and whether it would be taken seriously in the future. After returning to the dormitory, his roommate just came back from a mission, and saw the poster he had placed on the table. I heard that it is a new unit established by the headquarters, with high salaries and good benefits after retirement. I have signed up for this. Orbital Airborne Corps. What about you? Me. Zhang Feng was stunned for a moment, then shook his head. I'm going to think about it again. The monthly salary is 12,000 Singapore dollars, and this is just an ordinary frontline soldier. Those with military ranks and command experience are given priority for promotion. With his military rank and resume, it should be no problem for him to be transferred from the Marine Corps to become a captain. The monthly salary of 20,000 Singapore dollars is almost twice his current salary. However, it is said that the selection conditions will be very harsh. It is said that in addition to the physical examination, genetic sequencing is also required. In comparison, the physical fitness requirements for applicants are relatively low. According to the description on the propaganda poster, even if you are a useless sissy, our hellish training will make you a real man. Should I sign up or not? Zhang Feng shook his head, took out a form from his drawer, and took out a pen from the pen holder. Anyway, it's better to try it first. Anyway, you may not be selected. Thinking of this, he wrote his name on the form and simply filled in his resume. He stretched his back and leaned back in his chair. He put the form aside and planned to go to the military affairs office to sign up. When he went to the cafeteria to eat, Jiang Chen had been very idle these days. China had not yet come up with a result, so Yi Qinghe had not come to him again. Russia was not sure what they were thinking. Natasha did not mention the space elevator, and the Kremlin did not send anyone. Europe was very stable. Apart from the European Space Agency publishing a few papers on the possible impact of climate conditions and potential safety hazards on the space elevator, there were no other actions. Trapped in the quagmire of the economic crisis, they did not have the spare money to develop space resources. NASA did call and simply asked about the business status of the space elevator and the charges for orbital use. Jiang Chen had someone throw a brief introduction to them and then sent their people away. After receiving the information, they did not call again. As for the large, medium and small private enterprises that contacted Starring Trade, there were too many to count. The business phone of the Starring Outer Space Orbit Development Co. Limited, which is responsible for managing the space elevator business, is almost full 24 hours a day. If these companies are lined up, they can almost stretch from Coral Island to Silicon Valley. Among them is SpaceX, NASA's exclusive space exploration technology company. The space elevator has completed the first batch of material transportation from the ground to the synchronous orbit, and American private aerospace companies are in mourning. The first to bear the brunt is SpaceX, and the market prospects of the Falcon rocket worth billions of dollars are instantly estimated to be empty. After several consecutive days of decline, its market value has fallen from $12 billion to less than $10 billion. Even Google, a major shareholder with a lot of money, is heartbroken. Because the caller was Elon Musk, the chairman of SpaceX, the operator of Starring transferred the call to Jiang Chen. After the call was connected, the American legend who founded PayPal spoke very politely. "Hello, Mr. Jiang. We exchanged business cards at the Silicon Valley Innovation and Entrepreneurship Conference. Do you still remember me?" "Of course, Mr. Musk." Jiang Chen smiled and joked. "Even if we didn't exchange business cards, I still remember you. After all, I grew up drinking your chicken soup." The wealthy homeless man Musk, the plain-looking billionaire Jack Ma, the boss Kyle who rose from the bottom to the top, and the aspiring young men and women all made chicken soup on their social media and WeChat, all of which were filled with these seasoning packets. Although Jiang Chen sneered at chicken soup for the soul, he was bombarded with these things when he was in school. Moreover, he now seems to have become a member of the chicken soup family. Unemployed young man who started from scratch. He vaguely remembered that he seemed to be labeled with this label in some inspirational posts and Weibo. Although Musk understood Chinese, he didn't understand the stalk Jiang Chen said. But he just hesitated for a moment and ignored this small problem. After all, he didn't call to chat, but to discuss something serious. Do you have any intention to lease the space elevator track? Starring Trading is willing to provide a one-stop service from cargo departure to synchronous orbit and has no intention of leasing or contracting the entire track. Jiang Chen said with a smile and rejected Musk's proposal without hesitation. Musk was not frustrated by Jiang Chen's answer, but a glimmer of joy flashed in his eyes. Oh. It seems that you are also very optimistic about the prospects of outer space resource development. Of course, after all, the future is there. Jiang Chen said with a pleasant face. We have a win-win proposal here. I wonder if you are interested? Musk smiled. If it is a project other than leasing the orbit. Jiang Chen emphasized again. Although it is related to leasing, it is not leasing the orbit. Musk shook his head, cleared his throat, and said seriously, SpaceX hopes to lease the port of the space station at the end of the space elevator. The price we offer will definitely not disappoint you. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 937 Future Direction. Lease Support. Musk's proposal surprised Jiang Chen a little. In the discussion of the profit plan of the space elevator within Starring Trade, there are indeed pre-selected plans for leasing the port and berths of Starring City. After all, the scale of a person's market is limited. Instead of enjoying a piece of cake alone, it is better to unite everyone to make the cake bigger and then cut it. Only when everyone joins this huge market can the interests of Starring Trade be maximized. At the same time, many unnecessary disputes can be avoided. Imagine that the development of outer space resources by the whole world must pass through the space elevator located in the new country. Cargo ships of all countries will travel to and from the sea surface base station under the space elevator. All resources from outer space must be transported to the world market through the ports of the new country. What does this mean for the economy, currency, and international status of the new country? Competition? Of course there will be. But if you can't compete with SpaceX, planetary resources, deep space industries and the like with a century-leading technology, all the employees of Starring Trade might as well find a piece of tofu and die. But what surprised Jiang Chen was that, let alone the port and berth, the space elevator had just been completed, and even the Starring City was just a prototype. Before the United Nations Outer Space Development Summit was held, Musk had already considered such a far place, which really surprised Jiang Chen. How is it? Are you interested? Musk asked in a serious tone. Very interested, or rather, I'm surprised. Jiang Chen said with a strange expression. Oh, I don't know where I offended. No, you misunderstood. Jiang Chen shook his head and moved the holographic communication window from the left to the right with his fingers, and then said, we do have the intention of leasing the port, but the relevant plans are still only on paper. We can't give you an answer now, but since you brought it up, after the United Nations Outer Space Summit is over, we will contact you as soon as we have worked out a reasonable cooperation plan. Musk said with a happy face. Then I'll leave it to you. Anything else? Jiang Chen asked. Of course, there is one more thing. Musk smiled. We were originally scheduled to launch the Falcon 9 rocket in early February, carrying 450 kilograms of supplies to the International Space Station to complete the supply. But now it seems that we don't need to waste $60 million. Are you going to outsource NASA's project to us? Jiang Chen raised his eyebrows and asked with interest. Musk replied after a snap of fingers on the other end of the phone. That's right. There is a difference in the cost of upward transportation and downward transportation. Depending on the type of cargo, the carriages and acceleration schemes used will also be different, and the quotes will naturally be different. But in any case, the transportation cost of the space elevator is definitely lower than that of the rocket. The standard price of the Falcon 9 is $60 million. Even if the successful recovery of the first stage rocket can save 80% of the launch cost, the probability of success is not high. It is still as much as $12 million. Compared with 450 kilograms of cargo, the transportation cost per kilogram of materials is as high as $26,000. The price quoted by Starlink is that it will only cost 2 million Singapore dollars to send the Dragon spacecraft and the 450 kilograms of supplies it carries to the synchronous orbit. According to the current exchange rate, it is just over 2.15 million US. According to the US subsidy policy for the aerospace industry, NASA pays SpaceX about 61 million US. If it is outsourced to Starlink, the profit will be almost 60 times. And there is no need to gamble on the probability of recovering the first stage rocket. Such a terrifying profit is enough to drive any capitalist crazy. Even though outsourcing a subsidized project to a foreign country may cause dissatisfaction from the federal government, Musk still made such a decision. As for how to calm NASA's anger, he has thought of enough arguments. In addition, Jiang Chen also made a very tempting proposal. If the entire supply work is outsourced to Starlink, eliminating the launch of the Dragon spacecraft weighing about 8 tons, the price quoted by Starlink will be reduced to hundreds of thousands of Singapore dollars. However, Musk did not completely lose his mind and declined Jiang Chen's good intentions. After hanging up the phone, Musk immediately looked at his assistant. Cancel the launch plan in February immediately and package and sell the Falcon rocket related technologies and try to get it done before this week's United Nations Outer Space Summit. I'm going to the launch center in person later, so please cancel all the arrangements for the afternoon. A surprised expression appeared on the assistant's face. But, this is an order from NASA, and our Falcon rocket engines have been produced. In addition to the rocket engines, have other components begun production? Musk stopped walking toward the door, turned his head and asked seriously, "Wait a minute." The assistant reached out to the stack of documents on his desk, took out the one he was looking for, and quickly turned to the item about the production progress report. "It hasn't started yet, cancel it immediately. By the way, sell the rocket engine that has been produced. Stop the development of the Falcon 10 rocket immediately and allocate the extra budget to the third generation Dragon spacecraft." But why? The assistant couldn't help asking. Falcon 10 rocket. He thought that he might be the person who knew best how much effort the chairman had put into it, except for Musk. He really couldn't believe that after this phone call, Musk, who had single-handedly promoted the development of the Falcon 10 rocket, had ended this great project so casually. "Because it is outdated," Musk said without hesitation. He was also full of reluctance to make such a decision, but he knew very well that, even if he had made the calmest and wisest choice in his life half a minute ago, the birth of the space elevator marks the complete decline of traditional rocket aerospace. Just like tanks will eventually replace cavalry. Even if a large amount of money continues to be spent on the Falcon 10 rocket, it is just a dying struggle before dusk. The expensive cost of occurrence is not competitive at all in front of the space elevator. Relying on subsidies? The United States is a capitalist country. You can't live on subsidies forever. One day, the Budget Committee of Congress will lose patience. Looking at the struggling expression on the face of the assistant who has worked for him for many years, Musk took a deep breath and spoke slowly. "My dear Mr. Besmore, my friend. You should be able to understand me, understand that I'm definitely not as relaxed as I look at the surface. Giving up the Falcon series of rockets does not mean giving up everything, and making such a choice. I should be the most uncomfortable person in the entire company, but reason tells me that I must do this. It is only a matter of time to eliminate rockets that go from the atmosphere to outer space. The Falcon series has completed its historical mission. We will learn from it, experience and technology, and then solemnly close the coffin for it. I know it is not easy, but if we don't want this series to be our swan song, then we must follow the trend of history and move forward. Stronger, bigger, faster, and spacecraft that can come and go freely in the universe. That is our future." Chapter 938. Bolden is furious. "Musk, you bastard." Bolden threw the documents in his hand on the desk fiercely, sat down on the boss chair, and his heavy breathing was about to spit fire. As the director of NASA, he has always favored SpaceX and regarded it as the representative of American private aviation companies. Whenever there is a good project, the first thing he thinks of is them, but Musk now tells him that they have outsourced the supply mission of the International Space Station to Starring Trade. What the fuck? How dare they? How can they do this? Traitor, this is a naked betrayal. The other staff in the office fell silent, and even Bolden's assistant couldn't help but speed up his pace when passing by his desk. Everyone knew why this grumpy old black man was angry. SpaceX actually outsourced the mission of the International Space Station. Even they couldn't believe it. The aerospace market is a highly segmented market. Generally speaking, even if SpaceX's launch price is low, China and Russia will not give their launch projects to it. Each country's market has a maximum of 10 to 30 launch missions per year. It is already tight to support local aviation companies, so how can it let others do it? Russia outsourced the supply mission to Starring Trade as an exception. On the one hand, it was because of its own worrying economic situation, and on the other hand, it was because Jiang Chen promised to sell the RM-320 rocket engine used by Starring Trade to the Russian Space Corporation. Although the RM-320 has now been eliminated by Starring Trade itself, Jiang Chen did fulfill the contract. But there will never be such an accident in the United States. What made Bolden most angry was that he had touted the Falcon 10 rocket in Congress, throwing a lot of free titles such as epoch-making technology, rocket that changes the future of mankind, America's hope and so on to the project that has not yet produced results. However, now Musk told him sorry, our Falcon 10 rocket development plan has been cancelled. Oh, God. I will definitely become a laughingstock in Congress. Just when Bolden was furious, his assistant came over tremblingly and said in a hurry, Musk is outside. He said he wants to see you. Bolden raised his eyebrows, suppressed his anger, and said to his assistant, tell him to come see me. Yes. The assistant nodded and left quickly. He knew that his boss was on the edge of the crater at the moment. The reason why he didn't roar out loud was just the calm before the storm. Soon, the door of the office opened, and a man in a coat walked in. Bolden snorted with a nasal voice, and stared at him sharply. I was just about to look for you, but you came to my door yourself. Musk coughed and said, listen to my explanation. Go explain to Congress. Bolden cursed. You actually outsourced a subsidized project to a foreign company. Are you crazy about money? Of course I will explain to Congress. In fact, I have already prepared the materials for the hearing. He had to prepare. If he didn't come up with a reasonable explanation, those misers in the budget committee would probably directly send him from the congressional hearing to the federal court. After a pause, Musk continued without blushing, there is one thing I must clarify. I only outsourced the launch mission to Starring Trade, but the supply work is still done by us. Bolden, who was still angry, sneered and said, what's the difference? Do you think it still makes sense to travel back and forth between the ground and the synchronous orbit through chemical rockets? Musk asked back. Bolden glared and was about to speak, but he was suddenly stunned. Yes, the space elevator has been completed. What's the point of continuing to develop chemical rockets? That's not the future at all. He was angry just now, and he couldn't think calmly, because he lost his mind. Now think about it calmly. Giving up the Falcon series rockets may not be a bad choice. As an expert in the field of aerospace, Bolden knows the limits of chemical rockets. Seeing that his old friend has calmed down, Musk also breathed a sigh of relief and continued to strike while the iron is hot. I swear, I will use all the budget saved from the February launch project and the Falcon 10 rocket development plan on the development of the third generation Dragon spacecraft. In the past few years, we have continuously improved the Falcon rocket, but the Dragon spacecraft series plan has been stagnant for too long. Now it's time to move forward. Bolden's face was still gloomy, but there was a hint of relaxation. This means that we will have to borrow the space elevator of Starring Trade for the next few decades, and the port and berth of the terminal space station. I tried to test Jiang Chen when I called him. Starlink Trade is very sensitive about the lease of the space elevator orbit. There is almost no room for negotiation, but they do not rule out leasing the port and berth of the terminal space station. At this point, Musk paused slightly. There are 3 days before the United Nations Outer Space Summit. I think this information can be used as a reference at the meeting. Bolden's eyes lit up slightly. Immediately standing up from the boss chair, the old black man strode to the assistant's desk. There will be a meeting in the conference room in an hour. NASA executives must be present. Please give the order for me. Yes. The assistant stood up and was about to leave the desk, but Bolden held his shoulder. Also, contact the White House for me. Bolden said, I hope the White House will pay enough attention to it. It would be best if someone could come to sit in and take notes. Remember, no interns. Understood. The assistant nodded hurriedly. Before leaving, the Mexican assistant secretly glanced at Musk. He didn't understand how this guy calmed down his boss's anger. He originally thought that the two would fight after meeting. After all, it was not uncommon for people to fight after quarreling in the office culture of the federal government. After the assistant left, Bolden issued several orders to his subordinates in succession. After making sure that everyone was moving, he returned to his desk and sat down. His mouth was a little dry. He was about to drink water, but he remembered that his assistant had already gone to arrange the meeting. Just as he was about to get up and make a cup of coffee for himself, a cup of coffee happened to be placed in front of him. I need your help at the congressional hearing. Musk made a cup of coffee for his old friend, taking advantage of the fact that his old friend had no time to take care of himself. Bolden raised his eyebrows, glanced at the coffee, and then glanced at Musk. I'll help you, but the key is still up to you. Musk smiled. I feel relieved when you say that. Just as NASA was having a heated discussion about the upcoming UN summit, Jiang Chen had already ended a separate meeting with representatives from China, the United States, Russia, the United Kingdom and other countries. Although not much was achieved, Jiang Chen had made sufficient preparations for the upcoming summit. After this summit, the world's political landscape may not necessarily undergo any substantial changes, but the history of human civilization will definitely be rewritten. Chapter 939, The Epoch-Making First Train. Whenever I look up at this space elevator, I can't resist the urge to prostrate myself in worship. Only miracles can describe this magnificent project. May God bless mankind and not lose its way in the vast sea of stars. Amen. Standing at the foot of the space elevator and looking up, the gray-bearded old man in priest's clothes reached out his hand, touched the outer shell of the space elevator, drew a cross on it with his old fingers, and muttered an unknown prayer. Today is the first opening of the space elevator passenger track. In addition to the 30 astronauts who have received basic training, the 70 people who will take the space elevator to the terminal space station will also include 20 selected representatives from all walks of life in the new country and 20 special foreign guests. The quotas for these 20 people were generously given to the United Nations by Starring Trade. In addition to a few quotas that have been negotiated with China, the United States, Russia, Britain and other countries, the other quotas will be voted by the special committee established by the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. The Santa Claus with the white beard is the former Pope Joseph Ratzinger from the Vatican and is also the oldest passenger in this first opening. In order to take care of this nearly 100-year-old man, Starring Trade specially adjusted the acceleration of the space elevator during the acceleration and deceleration phases. This will slightly extend the acceleration time, but it does not have much impact on the entire 36,000-kilometer journey. Retracting his gaze from the old man, the man took out a small wooden box from his arms and slowly put it on his chest. He has a very white complexion, short brown hair that is slightly curly, and a look of nostalgia. In 1895, Russian scientist Tsiolkovsky was inspired by the structure and appearance of the Eiffel Tower and envisioned a castle in the sky that moves synchronously around the Earth. Looking up at the space elevator, the man murmured to himself, "The fascinating greatness, the charm of civilization lies in this. We can always get inspiration from our own culture to imagine unrealistic dreams and finally turn dreams into reality." "Who are you?" The black man standing next to him looked at him unexpectedly. "A writer." Rudolph Clark paused, looking at the wooden box in his hand. A memory emerged in his pupils. "Same as my grandfather." In 1978, his grandfather Arthur Clarke drew inspiration from Pearson's description of the American Space Mechanics Research Laboratory and wrote the book The Fountain of Heaven, which depicted the blueprint of the space elevator to people and influenced a group of subsequent science fiction works. The carbon nanomaterials and Ocean Equatorial Space Station even mentioned in his writing predicted the future in a sense. The main material used by Starring Trade to build the space elevator is graphene, and the end point of the space elevator is the space station called Starring City. You seem surprised. Rudolph looked at the black man. Indeed, the black man nodded. I see at least 2 writers here. As he said, he cast his eyes to the side of the space elevator. There stood an old Asian man who was not very sociable. There is a line of words here, written in Chinese. Murakami Haruki stretched out his hand, and his fingers gently slid across a line of Chinese characters at the bottom of the space elevator, muttering to himself, who could have left it? I know we can solve the next problem, because we have solved all the problems that have arisen before. If translated into English, it would probably mean this. Walking next to the old man from Japan, Liu Haoshan answered casually in English. As for who left it, who else could it be? As he spoke, a trace of nostalgic smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. When he was in Shangjing and Wanghai, he and Jiang Chen had an intersection, but now his official position is no longer the protocol department, and the Liu family can't keep him in that position to waste time. This time, he represented the Chinese government to participate in this era-breaking first opening ceremony, basically relying on the power of the Liu family. It's just that he was a little regretful that he didn't see Jiang Chen again during this trip to the new country. While they were holding the first opening ceremony here, Jiang Chen might have accompanied the president of the new country to Canberra to attend the United Nations Outer Space Summit. My name is Haruki Murakami. The 60-year-old man was surprised that Liu Haoshan spoke to him, and he extended his hand to him. Nice to meet you. Liu Haoshan did not mind the old man's nationality and shook the old man's hand gently. Liu Haoshan, nice to meet you too. Of course, not everyone would be fascinated by this space elevator. For example, the expert from the European Space Agency pointed out the design of this space elevator to the BBC reporter next to him with a sneer on his face. Have they considered the impact of high altitude airflow differences on the structure of the elevator? You'd better take some motion sickness medicine, because when we reach an altitude of 10,000 meters, we'll probably shake like ramen noodles. The European Space Agency expert added sarcastically. Maybe we'll break like noodles. Going to space with all the invitees. There was also an Electric Ray X-1 space plane hanging on the cargo track outside the space elevator. To be precise, its name is Electric Ray C1. According to the data released by Starring Trade, the Electric Ray X-1 will be a multi-purpose space plane that can carry multiple functional modules. The one carrying the transport module is named Electric Ray C1, which can carry a small amount of cargo to and from the space station. The electric ray for mining purposes is named P1, and so on, and the attack type is A1. However, Starring Trade has not admitted that it has plans to produce an attack space plane. At least for now, humans have not discovered the existence of other civilizations. In this case, it does not seem to make much sense to mount an attack module on the space plane. After all, according to the design drawings of Pan-Asia Cooperation, the weapon used by the Electric Ray A1 is a laser cannon. The power attenuation coefficient of laser weapons in the atmosphere also makes it impossible to become an efficient medium and long-range weapon. Moreover, using an aerospace plane without any aerodynamic design to fight a war in the atmosphere is far less effective than the Aurora 20 with the wing design. CH-001 train is ready. Passengers, please go to the waiting room and check your tickets in order to board the train. A polite and clear voice sounded. With the assistance of the staff of Starring Trade, the first batch of 70 passengers boarded the vertical train by a small elevator. The ticket Liu Haoshan held was a 07-9, which means seat 9 on the 7th floor of carriage A. Under the guidance of the crew, he sat in his own fixed cabin and fastened his weird-shaped seatbelt. During the ascent and descent stages, the carriage will enter an overweight and weightless state. During these two stages, passengers are prohibited from leaving their seats. However, when the elevator is in the stage of moving at a constant speed, passengers will be able to leave the cabin and stand by the window to enjoy the beautiful scenery that is gradually moving away from the earth. After sitting firmly in the cabin, Liu Haoshan took a deep breath, rested the back of his head on the soft pillow, and relaxed his tense body. Under a uniform traction, the carriage began to move sideways and then upwards under the traction of the mechanical arm. Like a bullet pushed into the rifling, after a short and slight tremor, the carriage entered the number 1 ascending track. Welcome to the CH-001 train of the Starring Outer Space Orbit Development Co. Limited. This train goes from the sea base station to the Starring City, with a running distance of 35,860 kilometers. The estimated air running time is 5 hours and 12 minutes, and the maximum running speed is 2 kilometers per second. The elevator track has been confirmed to be unobstructed, and the CH-001 train has entered the number 1 track. Please confirm that the seat belts are fastened. With their own thoughts, all passengers closed their eyes in the soothing music. The train is departing. I wish you a pleasant journey. Chapter 940, Verbal Warfare. Verbal Sparring. This was Jiang Chen's only feeling after attending this UN summit. Canberra, the capital of Australia, is located in an open valley in the Australian mountainous region. It is not very populous and has beautiful scenery. It was chosen as the venue for the UN Outer Space Summit. The Australian government attaches great importance to the convening of this summit because there will be many heads of state and high-level representatives sent by the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council visiting this summit. You can imagine the importance of the meeting. As early as 3 days before the meeting, the area near the summit venue in Canberra was under martial law. Stores were closed, and factories were closed. The entire street in the western part of Canberra was empty and there was no trace of people. The meeting was held smoothly without any twists and turns. Usually at such summits attended by heads of state, there are often more than one topic to be discussed, and it is not even limited to the topic of outer space development, and the highlight of the summit is often not placed at the beginning. The first topic to be discussed was not the space elevator, but the North Korean nuclear issue. Just 2 months ago, North Korea launched a rocket suspected to be a ballistic missile, which is said to be able to carry a nuclear warhead. What does this have to do with the Outer Space Summit? Of course it does. It has always been the consensus of the international community to use outer space for peaceful purposes. Although the thin-looking representative was passionate enough in his speech, Jiang Chen, who was sitting next to Zhang Yaping, still yawned. For a problem like this, that cannot be solved at all, it is just a waste of time, no matter how long it is discussed. In summary, the main speakers were basically the North Korean representative and US Secretary of State Kerry, and the content of the speeches of both sides can be summarized in 4 sentences. You are not allowed to launch rockets. It is my right to launch rockets. You try to launch one? Hey, I did. Fight? If we could fight, we would have fought long ago. But war has never been a matter that can be decided by 1 or 2 missiles and a pat on the head, and international issues are definitely not suitable for the players thinking of clicking the mouse to hit the opponent's base as the winner. People will find reasons that can convince themselves for what has happened, or use their own logic combined with limited information to deduce the so-called inevitability, and the only commonality of all the conclusions drawn by reasoning is nothing more than one, that is, they have never been truly correct. People will always repeat the same tragedy, and humans will always make the same mistakes. It is precisely because of this belief that Jiang Chen sat there fearlessly, yawned at NASA Director Bolton who was looking at him, then glanced at the nearest camera, guessing that it probably couldn't capture the part below his desk, and then took out the future mobile phone from his pocket with peace of mind, and started playing the mobile game produced by future technology. Even if the space elevator is right here, even if they know the value of this thing, facing the price they can't afford, they can only watch themselves go ahead of them. Zhang Yaping glanced at Jiang Chen who was sitting next to him, and couldn't help but whispered a reminder. You have a good mentality. Not bad. Our space elevator will be after 3 topics. You don't have to be so nervous now. Jiang Chen didn't look up. His eyes were still fixed on the screen of the mobile phone. Zhang Yaping was stunned and touched his face with a strange expression. I'm nervous now? Maybe it's my illusion. As Jiang Chen expected, the North Korean nuclear issue did not produce any results. But looking at Kara's indifferent expression, it seems that he himself does not think that any results can be discussed in such a meeting. After the issue of whether the North Korean missile was launched was a missile or a rocket, the Turkish civil war that has lasted from the second half of last year to the present was followed by the Ukrainian civil war. If the previous topics can still be related to outer space, then these two topics have nothing to do with it at all. It is purely because there are not many opportunities for such high-level representatives to get together, so they are forced to discuss it. These two topics did not last long, and soon the main point of this summit was discussed, the use and safety of space elevators. Jiang Chen put away the mobile phone under the table and glanced at the conference room at the same time. With his eyesight, he could clearly observe that the drowsy Italian president perked up. The director of the European Space Agency who was spinning his pen stopped spinning his pen, and the director of NASA who had been staring at him finally retracted his gaze and looked at the memo on his desk. The next topic is the discussion on the use and safety of space elevators. The voice of Ms. Maslin Osman, director of the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, rang out in the conference hall. Before she finished speaking, the president of Panama, a Central American country, stood up and asked the new country a question through the microphone. Regarding the space elevator, I have something to ask the president of new country. When you submitted the declaration of space activities to the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, it stated that it was for scientific research purposes and synchronous orbital space stations. When saying this, the president of Panama spoke unkindly. Central American countries are basically the younger brothers of the United States. Seeing the leisurely look of NASA Director Bolden, Jiang Chen knew that the speech of the Panamanian representative was probably meant by the United States. When Starring Trade built the space station bigger and bigger, it had already aroused the vigilance of the United States and other countries. In the end, when Starring Trade began to throw ropes from the space station, they were completely dumbfounded. When NASA analyzed and found that it might be a space elevator, it was already the end of last year. Even when Starring Trade announced the news in mid-January, they still couldn't fully accept the reality. That was something out of science fiction. Zhang Yaping stood up, held the microphone on the table, and spoke slowly. This is in New Zealand. New Zealand domestic companies carry out reasonable and legal projects within New Zealand's inherent territory in accordance with New Zealand's constitution, and there is no need to explain to the country across the Pacific. In the circular conference room, the representatives from the United States looked at each other. Although they had expected such an answer, they still couldn't help but look annoyed when they heard it in person. Bolden looked very calm, whispering something to the person sitting next to him. The representative from Panama sat back. Soon, it was the turn of the South American country Ecuador to speak. The dark-skinned president stood up and spoke in a sincere tone. Ecuador's border crosses the equator. Can New Zealand help us South American countries build our own space elevator? Of course, the Union of South American Nations will bear all the construction expenses of Starring Trade. I can make a promise here that this will be an investment of more than $50 billion US. As soon as these words came out, the representatives from China and Russia immediately became nervous. Where can South American countries get so much money to build this space elevator? Ecuador's GDP is only $100 billion a year. With tight finances, it's difficult for them to squeeze out even 1% of this $100 billion, let alone a $50 billion project. You can figure out who really pays for it. China and Russia are both countries far from the equator, and their overseas influence is also slightly unsatisfactory. It is almost impossible for them to own a space elevator. Otherwise, when Galileo came to negotiate with Jiang Chen, he would not have mentioned the matter of leasing orbits. Wouldn't it be better for me to pay you to help me build one? Among all the countries present, including those oil bosses in the Middle East, which country can be richer than Rabbit? It is precisely for this reason that China and Russia have been making every effort to win over New China. Regarding the question of the space elevator, I think Jiang Chen, the chief designer of the space elevator, can answer this question. As agreed, Zhang Yaping threw this question that he was not convenient to answer to Jiang Chen. When all the cameras focused on him, Jiang Chen stood up and nodded slightly to the representatives of various countries. It's an honor to stand here and answer the questions of the international community about the space elevator. I understand that you are very interested in this 36,000 kilometer elevator because it is definitely the longest elevator in the world and the most profitable elevator. Apart from corporate secrets, as the chief designer and chairman of Starring Trade, I will definitely answer all the questions I know. After speaking, Jiang Chen's eyes inadvertently swept across NASA's position, across Director Bolden's dark face, and finally landed on the president of Ecuador. Regarding Ecuador's request, we express our regret. Although we are very interested in this $50 billion project, our factory does not have the extra production capacity to complete this order. Perhaps you can choose other engineering units. Chapter 941 Mysterious Meteor. The train is leaving. Have a pleasant journey. Zhang Feng felt a slight tightening on his back, and he felt a pair of invisible hands gently pressing on his shoulders. The strength of these hands was very light. Lying in this specially designed decompression cabin, the discomfort of being overweight was so weak that it was almost negligible. Glancing at the screen on the armrest of the cabin with the corner of his eye, he saw the words 1.48 G flashing on the gravity index in the upper left corner. Seeing this, Zhang Feng couldn't help but smile. As a former soldier of the Starring Marine Corps, he could easily withstand a load of 3 grams. If it was not a long-term load, he could withstand even 7 or 8 g of gravity. The ascent acceleration is half of the gravity acceleration, and the maximum speed is 2 kilometers per second. Zhang Feng estimated and calculated in his mind that the acceleration stage would end in about 10 minutes. In fact, the time to end the acceleration was slightly shorter than he estimated. The feeling of overweight on his shoulders slowly relaxed, and the seat belt in the cabin was unlocked. Zhang Feng twisted his neck slightly, and like other passengers on this floor, he walked down from his seat to the transparent window and cast a fascinated look out of the window. This is impossible. A European man leaned on the window, his nose glued to the window glass, as if it was smeared with glue, and screamed, "This is absolutely impossible." There was not a single shake when passing through the troposphere and stratosphere. This is absolutely impossible. Unless. The European man looked up at the sky, his pupils shaking with an unbelievable look. Unless, the stress point of this track is not on the ground at all, but in the sky. The tallest building in the world on this floor was not built from the ground to the sky, but from the synchronous orbit downward. In this way, the entire track is stable due to its own gravity, and the stress of the material itself is enough to carry away the influence of high altitude airflow on the track. But what if there is a typhoon or other severe weather? Dmitry believes that Starring Trade will definitely not fail to consider this. However, as an aerospace technology expert of the European Space Agency, he couldn't figure out how Starring Trade did it. And just below this European Space Agency executive, there was also a window. Liu Haoshan walked to the side of a white-haired old man and asked politely, "Did you see anything?" After hearing the question of the younger generation, the old man sighed. "Except for the beautiful scenery that I will never forget in my life, with my old eyes, I can't see any doorway." The old man's name is Liu Haoshan, a researcher at the First Academy of China Aerospace Science and Technology Group. As one of the founders of China's aerospace industry, he participated in the design of the Shenzhou series of rockets. For this first opening ceremony, Starring Trade provided China with 4 passenger quotas, and he was one of them. The Aerospace Science and Technology Group and China senior management have high hopes for him, hoping that he can learn something from this first opening ceremony and at least understand the doorway of the space elevator. However, standing here at this moment, looking at the gradually receding clouds, he suddenly had the illusion that he was separated from each other by mountains. But soon, he smiled and shook his head, letting go of the worry in his heart. Although he is an expert in the field of aerospace, his expertise is in the field of chemical rockets. He can solve the technical problem of longitudinal coupling vibration that restricts the development of large liquid rockets in China with a pen, which makes aerospace experts all over the world look at China with admiration, but it does not mean that his talent is also applicable to space elevators. There are talents in every generation, and each leads the trend for hundreds of years. Liu Zhang shook his head again and said with a smile, now I know why Americans, Japanese, and British people give precious opportunities to a few writers who are not related at all. Why? Liu Haoshan asked thoughtfully. The old man raised his hand and gently tapped his grey hair with his index finger. We need imagination. The conversation between the old and the young attracted Zhang Feng's attention. Seeing familiar faces in a foreign country always makes people feel friendly. However, he did not step forward to talk to the two, but cast his eyes out of the window. It is said that the temperature will drop by 5 to 6 degrees Celsius for every 1000 meters increase in altitude. Outside the window, there were little ice crystals, wisps of white mist, and a thick atmosphere covered the earth like a spherical shell, like a fairyland on earth. Standing by the window, Zhang Feng silently took out his mobile phone and froze this beautiful picture in the photo. Being in such a magnificent scene, one can hear the exclamations of various languages. At this time, a slightly awkward Chinese voice came to his ears. Are you a soldier? Zhang Feng turned around and looked at the black man standing behind him. Instead of denying his question, he asked back, oh, how did you tell? Your standing posture is very special. The black man shrugged and smiled with a mouthful of white teeth. I heard that your Chinese country will specially train soldiers to stand and how to fold quilts into tofu blocks. Hearing the joke in the black man's language, Zhang Feng didn't care, but raised his eyebrows and asked back, oh, what do Americans train? The black man grinned and said, we train how to beat people. Then do you want to try with me? Seeing Zhang Feng's half smile, the black man smiled and shook his head, waving his hand. Hey, man, I'm just joking. If the two of us are thrown down from here because of a competition, we won't survive even with a parachute. After a pause, the black man coughed lightly and introduced himself. William James, Captain of the US Marine Corps. What about you? Zhang Feng, starring Marine Corps. The rank is also Captain. Zhang Feng shook the hand that the black man extended and shook it neatly. William's face showed a surprised expression, but soon returned to normal. I thought you were Chinese. You guessed right, I'm indeed Chinese. Zhang Feng let go of his hand. In terms of bloodline, as an employee of Starring Trade, can you tell me what is on the space station above our heads? William leaned on the railing by the window and asked in a casual tone. You'll know when you get there. Zhang Feng shook his head. William made a bored expression, but didn't say anything else. As Zhang Feng said, when the elevator arrived at the station, he would know what was up there. But this journey of more than 5 hours was too long. If he didn't find something to do during such a long journey, he would be bored to death. He was not the only one who was curious about what was above his head. There were also netizens from all over the world who watched the first opening of the space elevator on the official website of Starring Trade. People vented their shock in their comments and gave heartfelt praise to Starring Trade. Just as William was bored and looking out the window, letting time pass, he suddenly caught a glimpse of a bright spot with a tail in the dark and deep space. Meteor. Outside the atmosphere. How could it be? Rubbing his eyes, he confirmed that he was not mistaken. There was no reference in space, so he could not judge how far the bright spot was from him. However, standing in his position, the elongated light was so obvious in the dark universe. What is that? He muttered to himself, took out his mobile phone, and took a photo of the mysterious meteor. Chapter 942 Cooperation Framework. Choose other engineering units. This euphemistic refusal is really bitter. Although it was not shown on their faces, the Chinese and Russian representatives all breathed a sigh of relief. What they are most worried about is that Starring Trade will not be able to withstand the pressure and help the United States or its younger brother build a second space elevator. They don't mind a small neutral country owning a space elevator, but they absolutely cannot accept their competitors owning one. The best solution is that the new country has the sovereignty of this space elevator, and other countries share the big cake of outer space with it. The rejected Ecuadorian president looked unhappy, but he didn't say anything. He nodded slightly and sat back. NASA Director Bolden looked normal. He had expected Jiang Chen to refuse. After all, a monopoly market is always more profitable than a competitive market. at least before the emergence of a second company that masters the technology for building a space elevator. Starring Trade basically has no chance of accepting orders for the construction of space elevators from abroad. The topic continued, and the next issue to be discussed was very simple and clear about how countries can cooperate on the space elevator project. John Warner, the director of the European Space Agency, stood up, glanced at the representatives in the circular conference hall, and made a proposal. Space has no boundaries, and everyone should contribute their own strength to the collective of mankind. Although the space elevator is built by Starring Trade, outer space belongs to all mankind, and the space elevator should also be shared by all mankind. When John said this, the expression on Jiang Chen's face had turned into a sneer. It was easy to guess what he would say next. So, here, I propose. John Warner did not look at Jiang Chen, but raised his head to look at the representatives of the French and German space agencies, and then said his proposal without blushing. The United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs should evaluate the cost of the space elevator, and all countries should jointly pay Starring Trade for the construction of the space elevator. The space elevator should be purchased in the name of the United Nations and jointly managed by the international community. After John Warner's speech, the summit venue was filled with applause, as if it had been agreed. Immediately afterwards, representatives from European countries stood up and spoke one after another, expressing their agreement with the proposal of the director of the European Space Agency. The French representative seconded the motion. The German representative seconded the motion. The Italian representative seconded the motion. The Netherlands. Hearing the seconding voices, the corners of Warner's mouth curled up into a smile. Long before the summit began, they had agreed to put pressure on Starring Trade. So many countries seconded the same proposal at the summit. Even if Starring Trade wanted to refuse, it had to carefully consider the diplomatic risks of the refusal. Although Bolden, who represented the United States at the meeting, did not express his position, he cast a playful look at Jiang Chen. So many countries seconded the motion. Let's see how you get off the stage. Suddenly, at this moment, a strange voice sounded from the summit venue. The Chinese representative objects. Everyone, including the director of the European Space Agency and Bolden, was stunned and looked at the seat of the Chinese representative in the summit venue. The space elevator was built within the inherent territorial waters of New Zealand and should be owned by New Zealand. China's position is consistent. We oppose any country interfering in the internal affairs of a third country in any form. The middle-aged black-haired man standing upright glanced at the seats of the European representatives and said word by word, China recognizes the legitimacy of New Zealand's space elevator and is willing to cooperate with New Zealand on the basis of respecting New Zealand's territorial sovereignty and constitution. The summit venue was silent, and no one answered. Jiang Chen opened his mouth and was about to say something. At this time, the Russian representative stood up, held the microphone, and spoke concisely. The Russian representative seconded the motion. The Slavic-faced man paused and continued, regarding China's speech. 2 of the 5 permanent members have already recognized the legitimacy of New Zealand's space elevator. Even if there are more voices of opposition, this fact cannot be changed. Jiang Chen nodded slightly to the representatives of China and Russia to express his gratitude. Although he didn't think that the ESA could have any influence on him with this little trick, and no matter how many people seconded the motion, it would not be as good as his refusal. But the representatives of China and Russia stood up and expressed their opinions at this time, which did solve a big problem for him. Jiang Chen looked at Zhang Yaping and signaled him with his eyes to apply for the speech. After getting permission to speak, Jiang Chen stood up again, looked meaningfully at the director of the ESA with a stiff expression, and then faced the representatives of various countries at the summit and spoke. Starring Trade welcomes companies from all over the world to participate in the development of space resources. But before I say it again, we will never accept any unreasonable proposals. I hope some people will think more before speaking, so as not to be looked down upon. Hearing this, John's face turned pale, and he clenched his fists under the table. The representatives of France and Germany, who had previously seconded the motion, sat there with gloomy faces, obviously very dissatisfied with Jiang Chen's pointed speech. But will Jiang Chen care about them? When there is only one store in the market, the position of buyers and sellers is no longer customers are God, but you can buy or not. If you don't buy, I will sell to someone else. Now there is only one space elevator. Even if the EU countries are 100% reluctant, they have to pinch their noses and accept it, unless they are willing to be left behind by the world. After internal meetings and research at Starring Trade, we have two good proposals for your reference regarding the cooperation plan for the space elevator. Starring Trade is willing to provide satellite launch, cargo transportation and other services to various countries at reasonable prices. We assure you that, by using disruptive orbital transportation technology, our transportation price is less than 1% of the market price. In addition, we will build a giant space station in the synchronous orbit that is larger than Penglay City. The ring-shaped counterweight that maintains the center of gravity of the space elevator will be used as living space, and the centrifugal force generated by rotation will provide gravity to develop outer space industry and tourism. Considering the needs of various countries, Starring Trade is willing to lease living areas, industrial areas, ports and other facilities to various countries for a long time in the form of leasing, on the premise of retaining sovereignty. This is roughly the framework for cooperation on the space elevator. As for the specific details of cooperation with all parties, we can discuss it slowly. After leaving this sentence, Jiang Chen ended his speech. He noticed that, after he confirmed this so-called cooperation framework, representatives of many countries were ready to raise objections. However, Jiang Chen did not intend to argue with them here. After whispering a few words with Zhang Yaping, who was sitting next to him, Jiang Chen stood up and left the summit venue before they applied to speak. He attended as an advisor to Zhang Yaping and did not have any official diplomatic status. His departure would not have any impact on the progress of the summit, but it would definitely reduce the value of this outer space summit. But who cares? With the help of this United Nations Outer Space Development Summit, he conveyed the cooperation framework formulated by Starring Trade to all countries. As far as the result is concerned, the significance of his participation in this summit has been achieved. In this case, there is no point in staying here any longer. Of course, there will be countries that disagree with the framework proposed by Starring Trade, and there must be many of them. There will even be many people who sneer at the so-called framework. After all, for now, space mining is more like an unrealistic dream. Even though Starring Trade's lunar colony has been established for half a year, it has not claimed that it has achieved profitability in the lunar project. But Jiang Chen doesn't care. The rules are already here. Those who are willing to accept can share the cake together, and those who are unwilling to accept can just sit there and sneer. Even if no one takes the framework he has formulated seriously, Starring Trade can still play standalone in space. It's just that the development is a little slower. But he knows very well that it won't be long before the profits brought by the space elevator will make all the indifferent people today red-eyed. And the seemingly unacceptable conditions he proposed are no longer a matter of negotiation in the face of absolute interests. Bolden stared at Jiang Chen's back in amazement. He opened his mouth to speak, but finally closed it. There were some things he couldn't decide on his own. He decided to wait until today's meeting was over and consult the White House before making a choice. Several Chinese representatives exchanged opinions in a serious and low voice, and representatives from other countries who were interested in the space elevator were more or less the same. The summit continued. Chapter 943 Space Theme Hotel. The entire Outer Space Summit lasted 2 days, but Jiang Chen stayed in Canberra for a whole week. Half of the day was spent in meetings, 4 days were spent discussing business, and the remaining 2 days were spent taking Asia around Canberra to experience the local conditions and customs of Australia. However, there was nothing to see recently, as many stores in Canberra were temporarily closed due to this high-level summit. The gains from this summit were quite amazing. And it can even be said that it was beyond Jiang Chen's expectations in a sense. Originally, he thought that not many people would cooperate with him when he proposed such a demanding cooperation framework without any profit point, but the fact was not the case. The first country to express its willingness to cooperate was Morocco. After all, it was the #1 younger brother of Singapore. However, Jiang Chen was very skeptical about whether Santos knew what a space elevator was. In addition, Malaysia, Thailand, New Zealand, Madagascar and some small African countries all accepted the cooperation framework proposed by Starring Trade. After a period of research, China and Russia also expressed their willingness to accept the cooperation framework proposed by Starring Trade. The Chinese representative proposed to build a microgravity laboratory for the Institute of Mechanics of the Chinese Academy of Sciences in the weightless section of the Starring City, which will be used to carry out experiments on 51 national scientific research projects, including two-phase flow, microgravity combustion, gas phase epitaxy, and metal alloy nucleation superkilling. The price quoted was 1.57 billion New Zealand dollars. The conditions for building a microgravity laboratory on the ground are quite difficult, and the United States has been trying to obstruct China's participation in the International Space Station project, so that China's microgravity experiments can only find a way out on the surface. After all, the cost of maintaining a large space station alone is too expensive. In order to simulate the weightless environment in the experiment, China's solution is to design a very high tower to simulate the microgravity environment through freefall. In the National Microgravity Laboratory, which was officially approved in 1995, the design of the 100-meter drop tower, in which the microgravity time of the drop cabin system can reach 3.5 s, and the microgravity time of the drop tube system is 3.26 s, which is already at the top level in the world. This achievement is enough to be proud of, but also very helpless, because everything is forced out. After the summit, the first thing the Chinese representative did when he approached Jiang Chen was to propose building a microgravity laboratory in the Ring City and offered a price of 1.07 billion New Zealand dollars. Converted into RMB, this is a huge sum of more than 7 billion yuan. But compared to the tens of billions of dollars spent on building a space station alone, and the unimaginable maintenance costs, this amount of money is nothing. Since China is the first country to reach a cooperation agreement with Ring City on the space elevator, the microgravity laboratory cooperation document signed with China has also become the blueprint for subsequent negotiations with other parties. Subsequently, Russia also reached an agreement with Ring City to invest 950 million New Zealand dollars to build a relatively small microgravity laboratory in the zero-gravity section of Ring City, replacing the original plan to expand the Russian area of the International Space Station. However, the bulk of the profits are not these. The private enterprises that really made Jiang Chen a fortune were the ones who came to him. Originally, space was still an unattainable thing for ordinary people. If you are not a rich person, you may only have the opportunity to realize your space dream by signing the sale contract of SpaceX's Mars plan and boarding a one-way spacecraft to Mars. But now, things seem to have taken a turn for the better. Starring Trade announced the ticket price of the space elevator on its official website. The basic price before tax for an adult ticket is only 1,500 Singapore dollars. Converted into RMB, it is just over 10,000, even cheaper than a ticket from Shangjing International Airport to New York during the peak season. It's really crazy. It seems that overnight, space tourism, which only the rich can afford to invest more than 10 million yuan, has become a general overseas travel that even ordinary people can afford. After SpaceX, the second company that found Jiang Chen was not a space company, and its business was not even related to aerospace, but a hotel chain. The company that found Jiang Chen was the famous Hilton Group. As early as the beginning of the development of the new country's tourism project, the two sides established a good cooperative relationship and aimed at the tourism prospects brought by the space elevator. Almost as soon as the UN summit ended, Christopher Nassetta, president of Hilton Group, found Jiang Chen and made a straightforward invitation to cooperate. Mr. Jiang Chen, we are very optimistic about the tourism prospects of the space elevator. We have studied the relevant information about the space elevator published by your site. We hope to rent a space-themed hotel with a total area of 24,000 to 30,000 square meters in the zero-gravity section, low-gravity section, and surface gravity section of Xinghuan City. The reason why the cost of building a space station is expensive is largely due to the expense of freight. After the construction of the space elevator, the price of synchronous orbit construction has changed dramatically. Take the International Space Station, which costs $50 billion as an example. If Xinghuan Trade wants to build an identical one, the cost may be less than 1%. If you want to expand the same living area in Xinghuan City, the cost can even be compressed to less than $100 million. Xinghuan City is located in the synchronous orbit, and the developable area is no less than that of Penglai City. If it was a year ago, Hilton Hotels wanted to build a space-themed hotel with a living area of more than 10,000 square meters in the synchronous orbit, they could not afford the price, even if they sold the whole thing. But now, they can get this project at a cost of only 1.3 billion New Zealand dollars. However, before signing the contract, there is still a question that needs to be clarified. That is the opinion of the US government. Hilton Group is an American company, but the United States has not yet made any statement on whether it will accept the cooperation framework of Xinghuan Trade. Jiang Chen has no objection to Hilton Hotels' desire to settle in Xinghuan City, but if the US Department of Commerce makes things difficult, he is a little worried that Hilton Group will not be able to withstand the pressure. After listening to Jiang Chen's concerns, Mr. Noseta laughed and said nonchalantly, "Mr. Jiang, you worry too much. We are also a multinational company. Even the White House can't stop us from making money. We have registered a wholly owned subsidiary of Hilton Group on Koro Island. The US law can only apply to Hawaii at most, and it will not have any impact on our cooperation." After hearing this, Jiang Chen also smiled and stretched out his right hand. "I wish us a happy cooperation." Grasping Jiang Chen's right hand, Mr. Noseta shook it vigorously. Happy cooperation. The contract signing date was set the day before Jiang Chen returned to Singapore. Noseta came to Jiang Chen's house early in the morning with his secretary and personally delivered the contract to Jiang Chen. Jiang Chen had already received the electronic version of the contract, which was sent back to the Starring Trade headquarters and reviewed by a professional team of lawyers for 3 rounds. After receiving the paper contract, Jiang Chen simply scanned it with his watch, compared it with the electronic version of the contract to confirm that it was the same, and then picked up a pen and signed his name. After the contract was signed, Christopher Noseta enthusiastically invited Jiang Chen to have a meal together, and Jiang Chen gladly accepted his invitation. Having just signed an investment project worth more than $1 billion, Noseta was naturally very enthusiastic. Human relations are something that can be used everywhere, especially for the president of a large group like him. What can determine whether he can continue to sit in this position is not simply his ability, but more importantly, his network resources. Super high quality customers like Jiang Chen are naturally the ones he tries his best to make friends with. After the dinner, Christopher Noseta handed Jiang Chen a black diamond card. According to Noseta, the black diamond card is more prestigious than the diamond card, and it is not issued to the public at all. Only important customers of Hilton Hotels can get one. Customers holding this black diamond card can enjoy the treatment of checking into the presidential suite directly at any Hilton hotel in the world by swiping the card at the counter. Even if there is no room available, they can find a way to arrange it for you. As for free meals, afternoon tea and so on, needless to say, Jiang Chen gladly accepted the black diamond card, said goodbye to Noseta, and returned to the hotel where he was staying. After taking a shower, he lay on the bed, clicked on the holographic screen of the watch, and browsed the web. Tomorrow he will board the plane back to Singapore. Just as he yawned and was about to go to bed early, a video with a skyrocketing weekly click volume attracted his attention. The video was uploaded a week ago, and the time point happened to be the first opening ceremony of the space elevator passenger track. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 944 Asteroid Sighted. William James was surprised. He never thought that he had only shot a 20-second video, uploaded it to YouTube, and then posted it to his Twitter account, which would cause a stir on the internet. He was not an internet celebrity. There were no more than 100 people following him on Twitter, most of whom were his real-life friends, and some were just random netizens. He never expected that his video would spread like a virus to all major social platforms within just 2 hours after it was uploaded. The number of hits on the original video also easily exceeded 100,000 and was rapidly advancing towards the 500,000 mark. Happiness came too suddenly and inexplicably. Before William could react to what was going on, he watched his Twitter followers rise. 2 hours ago, he found a meteor outside the window of the space elevator. That's right, it was a meteor. As we all know, meteors are formed by the friction of meteorites in the atmosphere. There is no air in the universe, so naturally there is no way to form a gorgeous tail flame. He was sure that he was not mistaken. The bright spot was dragging a tail flame. In the pitch black universe, it is so conspicuous. Unlike most civil airliners, when the altitude exceeds 100 kilometers, the space elevator can access the internet through the quantum communication satellite of Starring Trade, and the internet speed is quite fast. Clicking on the video he uploaded, he opened the comment page. After watching this 20-second video, netizens left their amazing comments one after another. What did I see? There are meteors in outer space? Isn't this a landscape that can only be seen in the atmosphere? Don't watch, everyone. My profession is a porn appraiser. I have to watch thousands of videos a day. I can say responsibly that this video has been processed by PS. There are so many unreasonable places that I don't know where to start complaining. The person above, you are not a real porn appraiser at all. I do video appraisal for the court. From a professional point of view, there is no synthesis in this video at all. In addition, PS is an image processing software. Please read more books before you speak online. The great God appeared above. William stared blankly at the lines of comments on his mobile phone. He never expected that the video he uploaded would cause such a heated discussion. The Twitter name of the person who uploaded the video is William James. I went to the official website of Starring Trade and saw that this person's name was on the list of foreign guests participating in the first train. This video should be true, but why can you access the internet in the space elevator? Are you a pig? There is a network in places covered by the quantum communication satellite of Starring Trade. All places in the new country can connect to free Wi-Fi. You actually ask why you can access the internet. Such a result really made him laugh and cry. Just when he was about to post something on his Twitter account, the voice of the elevator attendant rang in his ears. This time, the CH001 train is about to arrive at the station. During the deceleration phase of the train, the carriage will experience upward gravity. To avoid accidents, please return to the cabin and fasten your seatbelts. The current speed is 2.1 km per second, and the deceleration time is. The angular velocity is a constant. As the altitude increases, the linear velocity of the elevator itself will naturally increase. The macroscopic manifestation is that the farther away from the Earth, the more obvious the sense of weightlessness in the elevator. When the elevator reaches the synchronous orbit, the linear speed of the passengers in the elevator will also reach the synchronous orbital speed, and they will be completely weightless. In the terminal deceleration phase, the passengers will move upward according to inertia, and the g-value of the gravity parameter in the car will become negative, which may cause the ceiling and floor to be reversed. Therefore, the crew kindly reminded the passengers to return to their seats and fasten their seat belts before entering the deceleration phase. William looked at the unedited tweets on his phone, sighed helplessly, put the phone back in his pocket, and returned to his seat. He made up his mind to reply to those curious comments after he arrived at the terminal space station, Starring City. The video was also seen by Jiang Chen, although it was a week after the video was uploaded. The popularity of the video even has the tendency to challenge the large-scale documentary The Journey of the Space Elevator launched by the Starring Trade partner media BBC. It has to be said that humans are gossipy creatures. Some people speculated that it was an alien spaceship, some speculated that it was a burning asteroid, and some funny Chinese netizens commented that it was a Taoist friend who was going through a catastrophe. However, Jiang Chen, who was lying on the bed playing with his phone, saw through the true identity of the UFO at a glance. That thing is not a spaceship at all. Isn't it the Bennu asteroid captured by Starring Trade? Question mark? A few days ago, the technical team led by Kerwin had dragged it into the Earth-Moon system and is now making the final subtle adjustments to make it as close to the Earth as possible. The closer to the Earth-Moon, the lower the mining cost. But what Jiang Chen didn't expect was that the rocket hanging in front of the asteroid could be seen so clearly in the synchronous orbit! Jiang Chen suddenly lost all sleepiness, sat up from the bed, and changed to a comfortable position to lean on the pillow. His fingers swiped across the holographic screen, and the voice typed in the keywords. Jiang Chen concentrated on browsing the relevant news on the internet. In less than 2 minutes, he found what he was looking for. As early as a day after the video was uploaded, the White House received a petition to investigate the outer meteor. In just 5 days, the petition's signatures exceeded 100,000. According to regulations, if the number of signatures reaches 100,000, the White House must respond. The White House was very straightforward and found Bolden, who had just returned from Canberra, and handed the task of investigating to NASA. And NASA lived up to expectations. After 2 days of investigation, NASA Administrator Bolden clarified the matter through the White House official website. It has nothing to do with any extraterrestrial civilization or Martians. It is just an asteroid. And this asteroid is not small. Its name is Bennu. The scientific community predicts that it will collide with the Earth at the end of the 22nd century. There is a net made of special material hanging on the asteroid, and 8 rocket engines are connected in front of the net. The mystery has been solved. The elongated light is not the tail of the asteroid at all, but the flickering tail flame of the rocket flying in front of the asteroid. The mystery has been solved. The Bennu asteroid has been pulled into the Earth-Moon system from its original orbit. And all this is actually man-made, which really makes NASA's old experts break their glasses and sweat for Mother Earth. According to NASA's observations, Bennu orbits the Sun at an average speed of 63,000 miles per hour, which is no less than the speed of the Earth's revolution. A collision with the Earth will be equivalent to detonating 3 billion tons of explosives. It can't be compared with the asteroid that exterminated the dinosaurs, but it is definitely enough to make all mankind drink a pot. Jiang Chen went to the White House website and took a look at the time when NASA published the report. It was exactly 5 o'clock this afternoon. At that time, he had just signed a contract with the president of Hilton Hotel, and then the two went to Hilton's hotel to have dinner together. No wonder I didn't receive any news. This time is too coincidental, Jiang Chen muttered to himself, pinching his chin and thinking. He didn't file the plan to capture the asteroid with the United Nations because he thought it was completely unnecessary. If he really filed it, it would be troublesome. There would be no benefit, except causing unnecessary panic. Now this asteroid has attracted the attention of the United States, or the whole world. Although there is no direct evidence to prove that the 8 rocket engines are the masterpieces of starring trade, it is obvious that there is no company in the world with aerospace technology that can do this. SpaceX has already risked its life just to send a probe to the asteroid to collect rock samples. Either it is a joke between aliens and the Earth, or starring trade is making a joke of all mankind. Thinking of this, Jiang Chen couldn't help but pinch his brows with a headache. What to do? Chapter 945. Is this really just a space station? Is this the starring city? The universe is cold, but standing here, Zhang Feng, wearing a short sleeve, only felt a slight chill similar to that in an air-conditioned room. Standing on the solid metal floor, he was somewhat surprised to feel the gravity similar to that on Earth. This should be the gravity section of the starring city, that is, the balance hammer part of the starring city. Standing around him, except for the American black man named William who was fiddling with his mobile phone, everyone walked to the transparent French window and overlooked the dignity of Mother Earth. A 5-hour journey, but it lasted a century. Rudolph Clark reached out and gently stroked the reflection of the Earth on the French window and opened the wooden box he had been holding in front of his chest. Inside was a photo, and the old man in the photo was his grandfather. The old man who had predicted this day with his imagination. Although everything was almost 20 years late. Can I throw it into space? Rudolph found the tour guide who was waiting for them at the exit of the space elevator and asked seriously, "This is my grandfather's last wish." The young tour guide shook his head and rejected Mr. Rudolph's request. "No. Any space debris that leaves the space station will become a potential safety hazard, and it will even cost tens of billions to recycle these garbage in the future. It's just a photo. Rudolph tried to persuade the tour guide, but the tour guide still shook his head and rejected his request. A photo flying at 3.1 kilometers per second is no different from a blade, and it's the kind of blade that can cut steel. Although it's a pity, Rudolph is not an unreasonable person. The tour guide nodded to him, thanking him for his understanding, then walked in front of everyone, clapped his hands, and motioned everyone to look over here. Welcome all friends to the Starring City Space Station. My name is Lu Fengming, and I will be your tour guide. If you encounter any problems during your visit to Starring City, please be sure to consult me, and I will do my best to help you. I won't say much. I wish you all a pleasant journey. The tour guide's concise opening remarks immediately won Zhang Feng's favor. He is a man of few words, and naturally doesn't like people who talk a lot. A group of people followed Lu Fengming and walked into the space station under the guidance of the tour guide. From the side, the entire space elevator looks like a letter Y inserted into the earth, with an outward opening that grabs a ring. And where we are now is exactly inside the ring, which is the so-called gravity section. We can feel gravity, but in fact it is not gravity, but pseudo-gravity generated by centrifugal force. That's right, the floor under our feet, and the space we are in are all rotating around the axis of the space elevator at a speed of several kilometers per second. Thanks to this outward opening and constantly rotating ring, the center of gravity of the entire space elevator can stay in the synchronous orbit, and we can feel the gravity close to the surface. We are now standing in this ring, with our heads facing the center of the circle. At this point, Lu Fengming paused, tilted his head and thought for a moment before continuing. It's very troublesome to explain it specifically. You can think of us as a group of hamsters running on an endless running wheel. Lu Fengming explained humorously, which amused many passengers. They all carried future mobile phones with built-in voice translators, and there was no communication barrier after wearing headphones. Many people were still wondering why they didn't float up after boarding the space station. Now, after listening to the tour guide's explanation, although it can't be said to be the specific technical connotation, it has a general understanding. After listening to Lu Fengming's words, academician Liu Zushan looked at the sky thoughtfully and then looked at the ground. His expression was sometimes clear, sometimes excited, and sometimes sighed, as if he was lost. It really deserves the name of miracle. Is this really a project that humans can accomplish? If the entire starring is to be accelerated, the angular momentum at the center of the axis must reach a terrifying level. What kind of metal can withstand this level of mechanical force? Titanium alloy. Impossible. Even titanium alloy can't do it. Graphene. That's even more impossible. Graphene is strong enough, but the common characteristics of carbon-based materials are here. The wear resistance is generally very poor, and it is impossible to make it into gears or spindles. Compared with Liu Zushan's shock, Dmitry from the European Space Agency has been completely numb. Unlike Liu Zushan, who specializes in the field of rockets, he is also quite accomplished in space station research, and even participated in the design of the International Space Station. Compared with Liu Zushan, he feels more deeply the terrifying power contained in this giant space station. If the International Space Station is put together with this starring city, the International Space Station, which gathers the technical strength of many countries, is more like a small boat in front of the port. The group continued to move forward and walked down the corridor. Here, the earth is not under their feet, but is always fixed outside the glass window beside them, like a lifelike window paper cut. This is the corridor of Starring City. We have set up living rooms next to it. Right below us is the MRT passage that allows us to quickly move around in this ring city. You can think of it as a subway of Starring City, because it is literally under our feet. The space in Starring City is very wide, and it does not give the illusion that they are walking on a pipe. After walking for about 1 kilometer, they came to a movable door. With the sound of the air pressure adjustment, the movable door slowly opened, and there was an elevator behind it. They got on the elevator, and the movable door slowly closed. As the floors jumped from 1 to 3, they were like moles emerging from the ground, and the scenery in their eyes suddenly became clear. Zhang Feng looked up after passing through the porch. Through the transparent dome, he saw the space elevator with the brilliant starry sky as the background, as well as the full view of the starring city. Looking down and forward, the shock in his pupils became more and more intense. It was the wheat field. The golden waves of wheat were like the sea, bathed in the cool ultraviolet light, and slowly undulated with the circulating airflow. At the end of the wheat field was a green field, where other varieties of vegetables were planted. He didn't know how to describe the word endless, because he really couldn't see the end of the field. He could only see the green and black where the sky and the earth met. People can live in pipes, but they can't live in a small space forever. 80% of the living space in Xinghuan City is designed in the corridor we just passed. And every 10 kilometers or so, we will design an external embedded space station covering an area of about 2,000 acres. They are like pieces of paper stuck on the ring. We can grow crops, flowers, and grass, real estate, light and heavy industries, everything we can achieve on Earth. Just by looking at it, you might think it has a high technological content. No. In fact, its technological content is far less than that of the corridor you passed before, not even 1/10 of it. If necessary, we can continue to expand its space. If we don't consider resources, we can even embed this kind of external embedded space station that has nothing but area on the entire ring. At this point, Lu Fengming paused again, and then added a sentence. Of course, the useless thing I'm talking about here refers to before it is developed. Hearing the tour guide say this, Liu Zusheng, who was listening to the lecture like a primary school student, twitched his eyes a few times. This is fucking. Is it really just a space station? Thanks to Kupa Yippa for the tip, the 8th leader of this book is born. I have always been too embarrassed to ask for votes, but today I finally broke out. Morning Star, I shamelessly leave a tale at the end of the chapter, and I hope all readers will check their votes and help vote for the monthly ticket. Morning Star thanks you. Chapter 946, Inestimable Value. This is really just a space station? Senior Liu Zusheng was not the only one who was shocked. When seeing the video released by Starring Trading, and the photos taken by the first batch of passengers in Starring City, netizens all over the world were also stunned by this magnificent space station. In a forum for aviation enthusiasts in China, a member posted the pictures from the official website of Starring Trading to the forum. The entire forum was immediately like boiling water in a boiler, and the topic of discussing this matter instantly dominated the forum. The members who were originally playing games on the forum also seriously discussed those pictures that seemed to be cut from a movie. Oh my god, did I walk into the set of Star Trek? The set of Star Trek? Idiot, how can CG special effects compare to the things that exist in reality? In addition to the meaningless spam and surprise, some people also stood up to discuss the set of pictures released by Starring Trading from a technical perspective. For example, someone who claimed to be an expert in the relevant field jumped out and posted a post with a little technical content, using as a counterweight, and the counterweight rotates around the axis at a very high speed. Through centrifugal action, tension is applied to the cable-like track to ensure that the track is taut. The counterweight itself is used as a living space, and centrifugal force is used to provide gravity. The person who came up with this design is simply a genius. When the number of clicks and replies to discussion posts like this reaches a certain level, naturally there will be industry masters who will jump out to give advice. In addition to those new members who are trying to show their presence, there are usually many technical masters who really work in aerospace units. For example, a senior member with the ID Aerospace second class soldier not only has a lot of dazzling certification medals hanging under his ID, but also has the China Aerospace Science and Industry Corporation written in the work unit column on his profile. He has a long history in the forum. In the era when this aerospace enthusiasts forum was still discussing Microsoft's Freelancer game, he was already popping up on the forum. The genius is the one who realized this design. Every time supplies are delivered to the space station, the position of the center of gravity will change. If the torque of the counterweight and the cantilever speed are increased to offset this, the amount of calculation involved will be astronomical. I estimate that even Cheyenne 1 will take a long time to calculate. As soon as the great god spoke, he immediately attracted countless attention. My god, doesn't this mean that the main control computer that controls the balance system of the space elevator is a supercomputer that is more powerful than Xi'an-1? Seeing the speeches of the noobs, Space Private sneered. As a diehard fan of Futureman technology, he typed a few lines in reply. Is it difficult for them? You may not know that the supercomputer chip used in Xi'an-2 is the Dragoon X1 supercomputer chip designed by Futureman Technology and produced by Futureman Heavy Industry. The new LIX architecture, semiconductor graphene material, and 7nm manufacturing process have even forced Intel, the industry leader, to give in. Let me tell you, the patent fees Intel pays to Futureman Group every year are enough to buy several listed companies. Speaking of patent fees, Aerospace Private Second Class couldn't help but dance with joy. Since joining the WTO, in the field of high-tech, especially the electronics industry, China has to pay tens of billions of patent fees to electronics giants such as Intel and Qualcomm every year. Although he is not in the electronics industry, he still felt very proud. What? Futureman Group is not a Chinese company? What does it matter? It is a Chinese company, and it is a Chinese company that has beaten European and American companies in terms of technology. That's enough. Of course, only a small number of people pay attention to technology, and more people still focus on another explosive news. This news was published on the official website along with a group of pictures of the starring city, almost sticking to the eyes of every visitor. Starring City will sign a contract with Hilton Hotel for a construction area of 30,000 square meters to build the world's first space-themed hotel. Earlier, Starring Trade announced the ticket price of the space elevator on its official website. The basic price before tax for an adult ticket is only 1,500 New Zealand dollars. This economy class ticket price is even cheaper than some airline tickets. People without money see the opportunity of space tourism, and people with money see the business opportunity of space tourism. Hilton can run up there to open a hotel. Why can't I go up there to sell sesame cakes? Although Starring Trade has not yet opened ticket sales, everyone's heart has flown to the scenic Coral Island. The Weibo of those almost well-known travel influencers has all been flooded with this space tourism with unimaginably cheap prices. Many of them have traveled half the world, but they have never been to the sky. When they heard that the ticket price information of the Starring Trade space elevator was open, their passion for travel was immediately ignited. No matter when the ticket sales start, it's always a good idea to go to Coral Island and wait. Just when countless people were planning to travel to Singapore, something even crazier happened. A domestic internet celebrity posted a Weibo post complaining about China Southern Airlines, not because of the service quality, but because the tickets were all sold out. This is going crazy. I just went to China Southern Airlines official website to take a look at the air tickets, and all the tickets to Singapore are sold out. That's right, all sold out. Even the first class seats are sold out. I was so naive that I thought I could get a ticket, but I didn't expect that all the tickets for next month are sold out. A stone stirred up 1,000 waves, and countless fans replied under her Weibo. Is it true? Why doesn't China Southern Airlines arrange more flights? Are you stupid? There are only 2 airports in Coral Island, and the 3rd airport has just plowed a runway. You have a large passenger flow here, but the passenger flow in other places is small. It takes time to apply for a runway. Adding flights is not something you can do on a whim. Now if you want to go to Singapore, you can only go by sea. First take a plane to Jiang or Wanghai and Guangdong, and then take a boat to Angier Island. But if conditions permit, I personally recommend flying to Australia, and then changing to a ship from Australia. This will be faster. In addition to those well-known big V's, the 1,500 Singapore dollar space tour has also spread among ordinary people. I don't know whose blog post they read, but some literary young women inexplicably regard space tourism as a soul-cleansing journey. However, the space elevator is not the Sichuan Tibet line, and it cannot take a ride with kind people. So someone posted a Weibo to ask for help. Sisters, where is the travel guide for Xinghuan City? Waiting online, it's urgent. The Weibo post was accompanied by a cute selfie. In this era full of kind people, if someone asks for help, someone will naturally help. For example, a netizen with broad thinking replied under her Weibo, You can buy a plane ticket to Singapore first, and then try to get a ride with driver Jiang. If you can get on his limited edition Lamborghini, he will definitely not mind taking you to the sky. Not only netizens around the world were shocked, but also governments of various countries who had just attended the United Nations Outer Space Summit. However, they did not show their shock on their faces, or on their official Weibo accounts, but instead held meetings over time to re-examine whether they had underestimated the true value of the space elevator. Chapter 947 Mining Plan started. The shortage of flights and airport runways did not affect Jiang Chen's plan to return to China from Canberra. Is a runway shortage a big deal? At his level, even if there is no runway, Kora International Airport will find a way to create one for him. Even if he can't create one, his private plane can just use the runway of the Crescent Island military base. That runway can even accommodate an An-225, not to mention a civilian Gulfstream G650. Back on Kora Island, it had been 5 days since the United Nations Outer Space Summit ended, and the first successful opening of the space elevator was a week ago. In a few days, the passengers on the Starring City will return to the surface. Now the Starring City is bare, except for an experimental field that uses some of the Garden of Eden technology. Only a small area of living space has been cleared, which can accommodate about 1,000 people. The only people who can stay in the Starring City are the 30 astronauts who are accompanying the space station to work for the Starring trade. The first thing Jiang Chen did after getting off the plane was to find Kerwin. The asteroid capture plan has been completed. The 8 rocket engines have been shut down. Together with the 500-meter diameter asteroid, they are quietly lying in orbit far away from the Earth. At this time, Kerwin is in charge of preparing for the launch of the Dragon spacecraft. This is an outsourced project of SpaceX, with only $2 million New Zealand dollars, which is only a drizzle compared to the first 2 projects he did. The launch procedure is very simple. Use a mechanical arm to hang the Dragon spacecraft on the outer track of the space elevator, and then it is a foolproof operation. After handing the launch mission to his assistant, Kerwin, who has become skinny, gave himself a small long vacation. He didn't want to do anything. He just wanted to stay at his private island that he bought for 10 million New Zealand dollars, lie in the beach cabin and sleep, and make up for the sleep he didn't get last year. However, he hadn't lived on the island for 2 days when he was disturbed by Jiang Chen's helicopter. The rotor of the helicopter blew the sand on the beach into a mess. Kerwin climbed up from the beach chair and saw that it was Jiang Chen who came down from the helicopter. His brows relaxed, and he greeted him with a smile. The technology of Starring trading has completely shocked this technician from Mississippi. If he were to say who he admires the most in the entire company, it would undoubtedly be Jiang Chen. Even if it weren't for the relationship between him and his immediate superior, his far-sighted strategic vision was worthy of his respect. Mr. Jiang, what brings you here? There's a problem with the asteroid project. Didn't you read the news? Standing firmly on the beach, Jiang Chen asked straight to the point. Kerwin was stunned and shook his head. No, what happened? Like most companies, Starring Trading certainly cannot be without an internet public relations department, and public opinion monitoring is its responsibility. Unfortunately, however, the asteroid capture plan is a high-level secret within Starring Trading. Except for those involved in the plan, even the top executives of the group did not know that the Space Launch Center had a plan to capture an asteroid. It was not until NASA's observation results came out that 8 rockets were connected to the front of the Bennu asteroid that the person in charge of internet public relations realized that this matter might be related to his own company. Jiang Chen told Kerwin about what happened on the internet and asked the project leader for his opinion. You can actually see our construction site on the space elevator? This is really... With a look of amusement on his face, Kerwin thought for a long time, but couldn't come up with a suitable word to describe this blunder. The propulsion device used by Starring Trade is not a traditional chemical rocket engine, but an electric propulsion rocket engine named RM400 designed by Jiang Lin, based on the RM320 rocket engine. Electric propulsion is to use electric energy to accelerate the working fluid to form a high-speed jet to generate thrust. The application of electric propulsion technology in the aerospace field actually appeared at the end of the 20th century, but there has always been a shortcoming of insufficient thrust, and it has not been widely promoted. In the timeline of the end of the world, it was not until the middle of the 21st century that electric propulsion technology made a major breakthrough. Among them, plasma propulsion derived from electric propulsion technology was used on some engines of the Zhenghe. Its technical connotation is also very simple to say. It is nothing more than the electrons in the plasma doing Hall drift under the action of the cross-vertical electric field and magnetic field, and the ejected ions form thrust to propel the spacecraft forward. However, even the American Astra Rocket Company, which has gone the furthest in the rocket engine project, has been stuck in the stage of hyping up concepts and pulling investors into the pit. This engine has a characteristic, that is, it will not form a more obvious tail flame and smoke column at the tail of the rocket. Don't underestimate this, it is quite critical. This means that, if you can't rely on the naked eye, you can only observe the aircraft using this engine from the universe at a certain angle or a close enough distance. If it is on the ground, in most cases, even if people find it, they will only regard it as an ordinary star, and will not pay too much attention to it. Now the outside world is speculating that it was the starring trade that dragged the asteroid into the Earth-Moon system. Under the hype of some people, a wrong trend has now formed in public opinion. What the starring trade dragged into the Earth-Moon system was not a large pile of ore-rich asteroids, but 3 billion tons of explosives. This speculation has no scientific basis. Kelvin held his forehead. That's right, but you can't expect everyone to have studied physics and learn to think rationally. Jiang Chen teased. The Bennu asteroid capture plan has been successful. Even if we don't consider the dozens of tons of explosives installed on the asteroid, there is no need to worry about any safety hazards. As for why, this is easy to explain. Since Bennu can be captured by the gravity of the Earth-Moon system, its relative motion speed with the Earth as the reference system has long been reduced to less than 10 km per second. Even if it really collides with the Earth, it can't be compared with the previous power. This is a headache. After some discussion, Jiang Chen made a decision. The asteroid mining plan will start immediately. We must change the public's misconception that our asteroids are not under our control. As long as the public can see that starring trade not only has the strength to pull this trouble to the side of the Earth, but also has the ability to solve this trouble, all negative information will be broken. The plan was completed last year, and now it is just a slight adjustment. After arranging this matter, Jiang Chen did not disturb Kelvin's vacation. He turned around and boarded the helicopter and flew away from the private island. Looking at the beach wooden house covered with sand and mud, Kelvin's mouth twitched suddenly. If he had known earlier, he would have built a helipad. After hesitating for a moment, he finally gave up the urge to clean up and called the decoration company. The phone number of this decoration company was left to him by the agent when he bought the villa. Its business scope is not only decoration, but also building maintenance, overall cleaning and other businesses. However, in this way, his original plan to vacation on the pleasant uninhabited island had to be ruined. Please give me a monthly ticket. Brothers, it's the last 3 days. If you can make it back to the top 5, I will reward you handsomely on the 11th. Chapter 948. It's like shooting a movie. After a week-long visit, the international friends invited by starring trade began to return home. The long carriage ran from the edge of the starring to the central track and began to fall down along the narrow elevator track. At almost the same time, at the other end of the main axis of the starring, a blue arc flashed briefly, and a black dot was thrown into the vast universe. With a long breath, the driver moved his stiff fingers and gently moved his thumb on the right hand holding the joystick to turn off the breathing assistance. The electromagnetic acceleration felt terrible. Although he had injected a drug to strengthen his physical fitness and had undergone stress resistance training, without a breathing aid and a decompression cabin, the acceleration of nearly 12 G and the acceleration time of more than a minute could still squeeze out the last bit of air in his chest. After moving his stiff neck, Liu Qingpeng turned on the dial on the holographic helmet. Half a year ago, he moved to Singapore through Singapore's space volunteer immigration policy. Originally, he only planned to work for 2 or 3 years and then switch to an electrician, but he didn't expect that, because of his talent in some aspects, he became an employee of Starring Trade and eventually became the pilot of the electric ray P1. The plan was advanced by half a month, but it had no effect on him. Although it was his first flight mission, he performed quite calmly. After all, he didn't know how many hours he had flown in virtual reality. Now, even with his eyes closed, he can drive the space plane to the side of the Bennu asteroid. There is no reference when sailing in the starry sky. Even if he is moving away from the Earth at a speed of 7.2 kilometers per second, he can't tell with his naked eyes that there is any change in the starry sky in front of him. Pointing his finger at the operation panel, Liu Qingpeng turned on the voice control system. Turn on the mission beacon. The signal light on the side of the helmet flickered slightly, and an asteroid constructed by 3-dimensional lines appeared in the field of vision directly in front of him. A top line was drawn above the asteroid, marking the word Bennu. Then, a pale yellow path appeared in the field of vision, drawing a slightly curved arc, pointing from the first cockpit of the electric ray P1 to the position of the asteroid. The route is set. The plasma engine output power is 40%. Forward. In the deep and dark starry sky, the tail of the electric ray P1 spread out layers of faint blue light particles, turning into an arrow that was released from the string and rushed away. In the ground command center, a man and a woman stood in front of a large screen, watching the real-time images sent back from more than 400,000 kilometers away. Outside the atmosphere, speed and distance are always just monotonous characters. If the number of 400,000 kilometers is put back on Earth, it will be enough to circle the equator 10 times. However, for the Electric Ray X-1 series of spacecraft cruising at a high speed of 20 kilometers per second, the flight time is less than half of the civil aviation flight from Shangjing City to California. After hearing that the first mining spacecraft had arrived, Jiang Chen came to the Space Launch Center. Out of curiosity, Zha Xiao also followed. In the picture, the electric ray P1, which had already completed deceleration, turned off its engine and slowly approached the asteroid entangled with graphene cables by inertia. The electric ray with its mining module deployed was like a water spider, and the ends of the first 2 mechanical arms ejected blue blades of light. That was not a laser knife, but an iron jet with a temperature of tens of thousands of degrees. Such a high temperature can even poke a hole in steel with just a light touch, so it is no problem to use it to cut minerals. The 2 laser knives crossed and cut 2 holes in the ore body without any suspense. The other 2 mechanical arms were like 2 pliers, snapping and fixing on the shell of the asteroid. The 2 forearm tools changed from laser knives to 2 alloy hammer-like props, smashing along the cuts. Seeing that the electric ray P1 separated the ore block from the ore body in a few seconds, Zha Xiao couldn't help but open her mouth in surprise. It was really strange to see an expression of surprise on her face. It's just like being in a movie, Zha Xiao exclaimed. And it's a sci-fi blockbuster, Jiang Chen teased. He had already seen the 3D simulation working graphics of the electric ray P1, so he was certainly not as surprised as Zha Xiao was when he saw it for the first time. At this time, Zha Xiao suddenly remembered something and looked at Jiang Chen in confusion. Why don't we transport it to the synchronous orbit for mining? Hearing her question, Jiang Chen smiled and showed off his aerospace knowledge that he had just learned. Although this asteroid with a diameter of 500 meters does not seem to be as big as Ring City, its net weight is much heavier than us. If it gets too close to the Earth, gravity will directly pull it over. Of course, if we really want to move it to a synchronous orbit, it is not impossible. We only need to add a spiral arm behind it as a counterweight like the Ring City, and then hang it in the sky. But considering the cost, there is no need for this. The pulse engine used by our electric rays is powered by nuclear fusion batteries, and the fuel cost is not high. Except for the acceleration and deceleration stages, the aircraft with a set route is only doing inertial cruise for a long distance. We just need to send the electric ray to the asteroid, cut the ore from its body, and then pull it back by cargo spacecraft. At this time, the electric ray P1 was like a mosquito feasting on a piece of fat meat, constantly peeling off the ore from the ore body and collecting it in the unfolded folding cargo box. Waiting nearby is the cargo spaceship independently developed by Starring Trading, which uses the RM400 plasma propulsion engine. Although its acceleration performance is inferior to the pulse engine of the electric ray, it has greater thrust and is more suitable for large and medium-sized cargo spaceships. After all, cargo ships don't need to do any high-speed maneuvers, they just need to go straight and carry the stuff. Xia Xiao glanced at Jiang Chen, a smile on her lips. Unlike Aisha, if you ask her when Jiang Chen's appearance fascinated her the most, her answer is undoubtedly his confident look. Now the relationship between the two is much closer than at the beginning. As promised last year, Jiang Chen selectively told Xia Xiao about the apocalypse. In fact, even if he didn't say it, Xia Xiao had already guessed something, but she just didn't say it. But when she heard Jiang Chen say it himself, she was still quite surprised. Just as Jiang Chen expected, the answer she imagined in her mind was a world away from his actual situation. She originally thought that Jiang Chen had traveled to a human country in the Milky Way that had entered the interstellar era, and the reason why Jiang Chen spared no effort to develop aerospace technology was to help the Earth fight against that interstellar civilization. And because of some restrictions, he had to go back for a period of time at a specific time. I have to say that women's imaginations are really big. This can almost be used to make a Hollywood blockbuster. After a while, the minerals collected by the electric ray P1 had filled a cargo box. Two mechanical arms clamped the hooks of the cargo box, and the electric ray carried the cargo box to the side of the cargo spacecraft, and then slowly placed the cargo box in the cargo hold on its abdomen. At the same time, the mechanical arm took out a memory alloy plate from the cargo spacecraft. After the power was turned on, the memory alloy plate unfolded into a cargo box similar to the previous one. The next step is to repeat the operation, and there is no more viewing. Xia Xiao still had things to deal with, so Jiang Chen took her out of the launch center first, and got on the yacht in the port. Just when he was about to go out to sea and return to Koro Island, a call from the presidential palace suddenly rang his watch. As soon as the call was connected, Zhang Yaping said directly, "We are in trouble." Chapter 949, Not Just Farming. Recently, the internet has been flooded with messages about space elevators, but the attention to the Bennu asteroid has not formed enough heat. From the doomsday theory in 2000 to the dull Christmas in 2012, people have been baptized by all kinds of bizarre doomsday theories, and are not surprised. Even if Jiang Chen stood in front of the media seriously and told them that there was a colony ship from the stars that flew to the solar system from 20.5 light years away for almost a century, it is estimated that people would at most smile knowingly and label this chairman, who is rich enough to rival a country as humorous or loves to tell jokes. Thanks to this, the voices protesting against the irresponsibility of Starring Trade are harsh but not strong. However, this does not mean that some countries will give up using this as an entry point to make irresponsible remarks about the space hegemony that Starring Trade is forming. For example, the United States, their small partner the European Union, and Latin American countries. The European Space Agency first protested against the irresponsible behavior of Singapore and asked Singapore to explain the incident at the United Nations General Assembly in September this year. China only expressed that it was paying close attention to the progress of this incident and believed that New Zealand would properly handle the issue of the Bennu asteroid. Considering the recent cooperation with Starring Trade on the microgravity laboratory project, China's diplomatic rhetoric was relatively peaceful, but it was obvious that it was somewhat dissatisfied with Starring Trade for pulling the Bennu asteroid into the Earth-Moon system without the knowledge of the international community. The United States' rhetoric was quite tough, requiring New Zealand to immediately provide evidence to prove the safety of the Bennu asteroid. Otherwise NASA would begin to study the plan to destroy the Bennu asteroid in outer space. When Jiang Chen heard the trouble mentioned by Zhang Yaping, he laughed out loud and said disdainfully, "Destroy? Where can I put it for them to destroy? They can destroy it? Landing on an asteroid is much more difficult than landing on the moon, and it is even more difficult to transport enough explosives to explode it." Jiang Chen certainly believes that NASA has the ability to calculate the orbit of the asteroid, and he also believes that SpaceX has the ability to send the explosives over. But send dozens of tons of special explosives up there, and then install them? Just relying on the toothpick of Falcon 9. If the United States diverts 10% of its annual military expenditure to SpaceX and gives them 2 years to study the plan and 2 years to implement it, Jiang Chen believes that they may really have a chance to blow up the Bennu asteroid. Anyway, his space elevator will not help deliver explosives. Jiang Chen's reply to Zhang Yaping was also very simple. The solution to this problem is just one word: delay. We have already started the mining plan in advance, and we will release the edited asteroid mining video soon. Aren't they worried about being hit on the head by an asteroid? Then let them see the gap between the natives and the civilized people. When they see our strength in using knives on asteroids, they will not be suspicious there. I have to go to the future mining company to do some work later, so I'll hang up first. In the Pentagon, William James, wearing a Marine Corps uniform, came to the door of a conference room led by a civilian female secretary. He had just returned to Washington from Coral Island not long ago, and almost as soon as he got off the plane, he was invited here by his superiors in a special car. The female secretary nodded slightly to him, opened the door of the conference room for him, and then stepped aside. James said thank you, and walked into the door. When he saw the people in the conference room clearly, his expression was surprised. It was impossible for him not to know Bolden, the black director of NASA. In this country with serious racial discrimination, black people who can reach the ministerial level are heroes or idols worshipped by these African immigrants. Sitting next to Bolden was Anthony Carrigan, the director of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, a thin white man with a hooked nose and freckles. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, referred to as DARPA. This incredible department has another nickname, that is, SHIELD. As for the two people sitting in the first seat, they are even more incredible. One is the current Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter, and the other is US President Hillary. After taking a deep breath, William James was about to salute his immediate superior, but Mr. Carter had no intention of talking nonsense with him, and couldn't wait to speak. Mr. James, we want to hear what you saw and heard in Ring City. William James certainly would not refuse. The reason why the US government sent this Marine captain to attend the opening ceremony was to gather intelligence. The black soldier nodded, swallowed his saliva and spoke. After about 5 hours of flight, we arrived at the Synchronous Orbital Space Station, which is Ring City. It's slower than the rocket. Mr. Carrigan lowered his voice and said beside Hillary, our Falcon rocket will take less than half an hour. SpaceX received technical support from the DARPA department when developing the Falcon series of rockets, so Carrigan's use of the term our Falcon rocket was not wrong. However, when he said this, Bolden glanced at him, but said nothing, and looked away 2 seconds later. Hillary nodded, did not speak, but continued to look at James seriously, waiting for the black soldier's next words. After arriving at the terminal, Starring Trade sent a guide to take us into the interior of Starring City. According to him, the entire Starring City is a ring, and the ring is also the counterweight of the space elevator. There are subways, living units, and external space stations on it. At this point, William James paused, and a trace of longing gradually emerged in his eyes. The most shocking thing is that they moved the farmland into the space station. The American senior executives present looked at each other, and only Carrigan turned his pen with disdain. There are also planting units on the International Space Station. This is not a special technology, and there is nothing to be surprised about. As early as 10 years ago, we saw pumpkins transported back from the International Space Station. Is there anything else besides this? Hillary and Ashton also nodded. Just growing vegetables in space is not a new technology. As early as 10 years ago, the United States had solved this problem in the laboratory. 14 years later, it approved the establishment of a space farm in the American area of the International Space Station, and successfully planted a variety of surface plants such as Chinese cabbage and carrots. Compared to these insignificant technologies, they were more concerned about the potential value of Starring City in military and economic aspects. Among all the people present, only Bolden was indifferent. He came back from the United Nations Outer Space Summit and knew very well how advanced the aerospace technology of Starring Trade was. It was not easy to contradict his boss, but William James felt that he needed to remind everyone present, so he whispered, "But their area is 2,000 acres. The meeting room was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard clearly. The spinning pen had fallen on the notebook." Carrigan's mouth opened slightly, closed, and then opened again, like a robot. Hillary had no expression on her face, and she really had no expression, because she didn't know what expression to make to show her shock. Even Bolden's dark face changed slightly. Even though he had been prepared, he was still shocked by the big deal of starring trade. Is it easy to grow vegetables in space? It is indeed very simple. But what about large-scale planting? These are two completely different concepts. An embedded space station with an area of more than 2,000 acres? Is this really called a space station? Seeing that his immediate superior, the Secretary of Defense, seemed to have a bad expression, William James hesitated and asked in a low voice, "Do you need to continue reporting?" "Go on," Hillary said in a deep voice. Seeing Ashton nodded, William James continued, "Most of the space stations are idle land. We only saw one with 2,000 acres of farmland." Everyone present breathed a sigh of relief. It seems that such a shocking thing is not so easy to build. Even with the financial resources of starring trade, only one was built. But then, William James' words made everyone's mood, which had finally improved, fall to the bottom in an instant. Carrigan's jaw, which had finally closed, fell again. I asked the tour guide why those vacant lands were left idle and not all planted with wheat. He told me that this kind of external universal space station has many uses, not just farming. They plan to build houses and factories on it. It's just that the population in Starring City is small now, and there is no need to develop so many agricultural areas. At this moment, William James' speech was interrupted. A man who looked like an assistant pushed open the door and walked into the meeting room in a hurry. Facing the dissatisfied eyes, he didn't care so much at the moment. He took out the iPhone 8 from his pocket and walked towards Hillary with a serious face. "What's the matter? Mr. Eric, don't you know we are in a meeting now? Starring Trade has made new moves. You asked me to keep an eye on them. Believe me, I definitely didn't mean to break into the meeting room. Please allow me to take up 3 minutes of your time." As he said that, the man called Eric tapped a few times on his phone and then handed the phone to Hillary. It was a video, or it looked like it was edited from a science fiction movie. Hillary frowned slightly, wondering why the White House assistant would specially break into the meeting room to show her such a Hollywood movie. Ashton glanced at the video and didn't take it seriously at first, but he didn't know if he discovered something, and soon his expression gradually became interesting. Bolden, who was sitting next to him, froze in his expression the moment he saw the full view of the asteroid. After a while, his stiff facial muscles twitched and he whispered, "This is the Bennu asteroid. The video doesn't look like CG." Hillary, who was watching with great interest, was stunned, looking at the phone with an expression as if she had seen a ghost, and screamed in surprise. "This is impossible. Today's monthly pass is doubled." Chapter 950. There is no comparison. This is impossible. With a critical attitude, Fred clicked on the video titled Asteroid Mining Record on the official website of Starring Trade. His expression gradually changed from disdain to suspicion, and then from disdain to shock. When he saw two laser-like light blades pop out from the two mechanical arms, his heart suddenly contracted. And then, there was the previous exclamation of "This is impossible." The video continued to play. The two light blades crossed and cut two holes in the ore body without any hindrance. Then the tool changed from a knife to a hammer, and a large piece of ore was peeled off from the asteroid in a few seconds. The mechanical hammer hit the ore body, and at the same time, it also hit his heart. Dang. The technical strength demonstrated by future mining completely shattered his doubts and disdain. He is the editor-in-chief of the technology section of the New York Times. In his work in recent years, he has summed up a rule, that is, compared with the product launches of Apple and Microsoft, readers seem to be more and more keen to know what new things the Future Group has come up with. Since NASA announced that the Starring Trade had dragged the Bennu asteroid into the Earth-Moon orbit, he has published more than a dozen articles in a row to follow up on this. Who gave the lunatics in the Pacific the power to drag 3 billion tons of explosives to the vicinity of our homeland? Technology must be restricted. Unrestrained technology will only accelerate our destruction. This time it was 3 billion tons of explosives. So what about next time? 10 billion tons? God can't save us by then. We will be extinct in the hard landing of the asteroid like the dinosaurs. As the editor-in-chief of the Science and Technology section, it seems a bit wrong for him to say these words. But as an editor-in-chief who climbed up from a reporter, he knows very well what a journalist should say. The seriousness and rigor of news? No, that's all old news from the last century. News without gimmicks has no future. Therefore, he chose to sing a different tune from the mainstream society. At the same time, he also believed that he had an obligation to stand up and remind Americans who blindly pursue the technology of the future man to treat the ever-expanding man rationally. Because of his sharp words and controversial speeches, he was even invited as a guest on a famous American talk show and appeared on a TV show as the editor-in-chief of the Los Angeles Times. In his computer, a document criticizing starring trade for dragging asteroids to the Earth-Moon system has been edited and is waiting for him to take it back to the newspaper for publication. For this document, he almost ran all over the colleges and universities in Washington state and even flew to Massachusetts to find an astronomy expert who taught at Harvard University to ask for advice, proving that mining on the Bennu asteroid is impractical and extremely dangerous. He is very confident about this report because the Harvard professor patted his chest and assured him that even with the world's top technology, at most a few mineral samples could be brought back from the Bennu asteroid. The fuel consumed to transport or back and forth from 400,000 kilometers away is several times more expensive than the ore collected. Facts have proved that the professor has been in the laboratory for too long and can no longer keep up with the development of the times. And the video released by Starring Trade almost slapped Fred's face. Impossible? Starring Trade showed him what it meant to make the impossible possible with practical actions. After wordlessly deleting the video, Fred rubbed his sore brows. Fuck, what have I done in the past half month? He put too much effort into this report. However, if it was published, it would be like sticking his face out to be beaten again. But if he just gave up like that, he finally made the decision to give up the report, and he felt his heart was beating. China, Shangjing City. In the Aerospace Technology Laboratory of the University of Science and Technology of China, an old professor with grey hair was staring at the images on the computer screen meticulously, and he was amazed from time to time. Standing behind him was an old man with a straight back and a dignified face, and a middle-aged man with a square face. The old man's name was Liu Zusheng, an academician of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. He had just returned from Koro Island some time ago, and before he had rested for 2 or 3 days, his old leader found him and handed him a video file. The video is a working video of the latest spacecraft of Starring Trade, the Electric Ray P-1. The country is very interested in the engine used by the Electric Ray P-1 and the laser knife that cuts the ore body, so they found him, who is the most prestigious in the field of aerospace in China, hoping that he can carefully study it and see if he can find any clues from the video. After watching the video over and over again for more than 10 times, academician Liu finally sighed and turned off the video when he watched it for the 20th time. Seeing this, the middle-aged man standing behind him couldn't wait to ask, "How is it, academician Liu? Did you see anything?" Liu Zusheng glanced at him, picked up the teacup next to him, moistened his throat, and spoke slowly. "If I'm not mistaken, their engine uses electric propulsion technology." The middle-aged man's expression was slightly moved, and he was about to say something, but academician Liu spoke slowly before him. "I know what you want to say. It's just that this is impossible. The thrust of electric rockets is more than 1 order of magnitude smaller than that of chemical rockets. But I want to tell you, now that the specific impulse of the electromagnetic propulsion system is much higher than that of the chemical fuel propulsion system. Using the principle of electromagnetic acceleration, theoretically, it is possible to obtain an exhaust velocity that is 1 to 2 orders of magnitude higher than that of chemical fuel. I don't know what future spacecraft will look like, but I can be sure that future spacecraft will not be tied to bundles of fuel tanks and waste a lot of precious fuel on accelerating the fuel itself. What you want to say is impossible, but it is impossible with our technology. Academician Liu's words left the middle-aged man speechless. As the head of China Aerospace Science and Technology Group, only this old man who designed the Sun Jiao series dared to talk to him like this, and he was convinced. Although his administrative level was much higher than his, in terms of importance to the country, 10 of him could not compare to one academician with real ability. At this time, the old man who had been standing there without saying a word slowly spoke. What about the laser knife that can cut minerals? That is not a laser knife. Academician Liu shook his head. Although it is not something in my field, I also know a little about it. That thing is probably iron jet technology. By spraying iron jets with a temperature of tens of thousands of degrees, let alone an ore body, even a piece of depleted uranium steel placed there will be poked out a hole. The old man's face changed slightly, and the shock on the middle-aged man's face was even more obvious. This means that even a tank placed in front of the iron jet knife will be as useless as paper. After restraining his shock, the old man asked in a deep voice, "Take this electric ray P1 as an example. How big is the gap between us and them in electric propulsion and iron jet technology? Is it possible to imitate similar equipment?" Liu Zusheng shook his head. "Our starting point in the field of aerospace is too low. There is still a big gap compared with the United States and Russia. If we compare it directly with starring trade, to be honest, it can't be compared at all. There is no comparison at all." The middle-aged man couldn't help but smile bitterly. Although he had never imagined that the Aerospace Science and Technology Group could develop a similar spacecraft in his hands, the answer of Senior Liu still made him feel bitter. At this time, the dignified old man spoke again. "Strengthen cooperation with starring trade, especially in the field of aerospace. Since the broad prospects for the development of outer space resources have been proven, we must not be left behind in this regard." When saying this, the old man was looking at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man understood and nodded immediately. Understood. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.